And with that, we'd like to bring forth a pastor from our local churches, from Ferraro Church of Lake Forest, Pastor Steve Pinto. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. We pray, Lord, for the City Council of Lake Forest, to whom you have entrusted leadership on this beloved city at this moment in history. We pray that you'll help them lead our city to continue its legacy of remembering the past and challenging the future. We pray that their guidance would be steadfast, their governance immovable, and that they may always abound in good and profitable work, knowing that their labor is not in vain. May their service always be rooted and grounded in love. Give our city council members and all its advisors wisdom in the midst of confusion, faith in the face of the storms, encouragement in the face of frustration, and humility in the face of success. Give them the wisdom to know and to do what is right, and the courage to go beyond what others have accomplished. And finally, Lord, in these challenging and difficult days, we pray for the protection and the safeguard of our city, our leaders, our public servants, our schools, our children, and our families. Lord, we thank you and give you all the glory and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll be led by the Pledge of Allegiance by me. If you would stand and prepare yourself for the Pledge of Allegiance to the greatest symbol of freedom in the world, for the greatest nation in the world. So with that, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There was no closed session tonight, so we'll move right to presentations. I'd like to take a motion.
Move presentations.
Second.
Please vote.
That motion carried unanimously.
Okay, presentations.
Agenda item number 4, commendation recognizing past Parks and Recreation Commissioner Steve Manning, submitted by Director of Community Services.
Is Steve here? Okay. Thank you for your service to us. Okay. You know, we're a blessed city, as we talked about, and you know, part of the reason we're blessed is because of the community involvement of people like Steve. Steve was one of the long-serving Park and Rec commissioners that actually came up and helped guide us into the opening of our sports park. Besides that, we've got $8 million of other sports renovations that he's done. And so the fact that we talk about how blessed we are in the city and all the open space and all the parks that we have, well, it's partly to do like people like Steve. So Steve's involvement with our city was a true blessing to us. So on behalf of the city of Lake Forest, I'd like to commend you and thank you for your service to our city. So congratulations and thank you so much. Why don't you say a few words?
Great, thank you. I just talk, okay. Guys, I was hoping there was going to have a year on here since 1994, huh? Okay, it was 20. I just wanted to say a couple things real quick. And first of all, thank you guys for acknowledging me tonight. And that's a neat honor to have. It's been a fun time being involved with Parks and Rec in the city of Lake Forest. I appreciate what you guys are doing now for us. the city staff that you guys get the pleasure of working with, and I don't get to work with everybody in this room as much, or as I did with some of the community services group, but what a tremendous staff that we've had here at the city throughout the last 20 years. Bob, a big kudos to you and everything that you've done and gone through many different challenging times, but some great times. Vicki, who's here, and Rob, there's Vicki, Ron and Nick from our community services group, and the rest of it, all that they do. When I joined this commission some years ago, I think our leaflet was a half of a page of a document that came out quarterly, and as you see the leaflet now and see that's all involved, it's Vicki and the rest of her crew and everything that they do that has just made tremendous strides, and the things that we offer to our city is great. I want to thank my Park and Rec members, who I think most of them are here, Loretta and Jim and Jeff and Victor, for the last, I'm not sure how many years we've been together. I know Jeff and Victor recently, but Loretta and of course Jim through the years. Jim and I met on a soccer field. It seemed like 100 years ago, but it was close to that. But I appreciate everything that they've done, and I never thought what we did on the Park and Rec as a job or as a struggle of anything. It was a fun night to get together and talk about fun things that the city got to do. Also wanted to just thank some of the past council members that were here. Without them, none of these things that we did. Scott, as you mentioned, the $8 million of improvements that went on, and certainly the sports park I'll talk about in just a second. But Diane and Richard and Helen and some of the folks before, Marcia, I see her out here, and Catherine, and a big thank you also to Peter Herzog, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years. I know he was a big proponent of our sports park and helping get that through. Gary McGill was our community service leader for 8 to 10 years or so, and I'll tell you, he was a pleasure to work with. I started with Joe D'Onofrio some 20 years ago, and to everybody that was in between. But Gary was a rock, and I remember we'd talk about things that we'd want to do, and Gary would say, well, let's just ask. And some of you guys that were involved in it then said yes to a lot of the stuff that we got to do, so that was fun. Lastly, when I got on the commission, it was one of my dreams and one of my hopes. I did a lot of coaching of my kids through the years, and 15 years of AYSO and 13 or 14 of baseball, some football, some basketball. But when we used to have to go down and play at the dirt field at Rancho Cañada to play soccer on, and you were watching kids trip over rocks and all that kind of stuff. We played football at Glen Yermo Elementary School. And that was a challenge to find an even playing field to run on. But one of my dreams was to see something built and to see some improvement on our kids for our kids. And it was my dream and my hope that I would get to see my kids play on one of my fields, or on an eventual sports park, I should say. And that didn't come to fruition. It took a little longer than I think we had all hoped, but the crown jewel that's out there today is a testament that waiting is good, and coming up with something so spectacular and so amazing is just a true blessing. I'm fortunate I got to actually see one of my kids coach a 13-year-old travel ball team down there a couple months ago, and then the latest and greatest and the funnest part for me was bringing my grandson down and getting him to enjoy the play equipment as he just turned 6 months old. So that's been fun. But I'm fortunate. I live a half a mile from there. I'm down there 3 mornings a week with my dog. She's on the leash most of the time, I promise. But at 6:30, there's not too many folks out there. But I'm enjoying the walk around the park and the run around the park, the play equipment that's out there. My wife and I go down every weekend and walk. And I think I truly had the greatest satisfaction of walking through the park. A few weeks back, AYSO was hosting a soccer tournament there. And as we come in from my neighborhood, and we always go up at the top of the hill, and you look down upon it, and there was 8 fields being used. And just the sheer joy and excitement and energy that was going on was great. The parking lots were full. We walk around back to the baseball field. There was 3 baseball games going on. You walked back through, and the basketball courts were being used, the indoor courts were being used. There was birthday parties and things. It was just it was so fun to see, and I'm very fortunate to be so close that I get to enjoy it as much as I have, and all the rest of the things. So thank you guys for it. Thank you all the city and the staff that do it. Sorry for taking so long, but I do appreciate this very, very much.
No, thank you. And you know, it was really visionary with what you guys have done with our city, and the vision you guys had in that amount of land becoming a sports park, and the crown jewel of probably Southern California, not only Orange County but Southern California, as a destination for kids that play soccer from Yorba Linda and from San Clemente, from San Diego. On August 15th, there'll be another big, huge soccer tournament there. It is actually such a magnet and a destination for us, and so we owe you guys a debt. You guys with your visionary leadership, but thank you guys so much for what you've done for us, and we're just proud to have that, and proud to have you in our community.
My pleasure. Thank you guys.
God bless. With that, yeah.
Next is our report from our student liaison.
No, we got two more proclamations. Declaring the city April 22nd as Earth Day for the city of Lake Forest, submitted by Director of Public Works and Engineer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, do we have that certificate here somewhere? Does Tom already have it and it's hanging in his office? Maybe not. We'll turn it over to him, because I believe this is an item as well as the next one that comes out of Public Works.
These are just two items to just let the public be aware of Arbor Day and Earth Day, the importance of the earth, the importance of trees. Obviously, we are Lake Forest. And just another good reminder of another great reminder of our fine city and how we support the earth and the trees. And with this proclamation, if the mayor wants to join me down there, if I can pass it back up to the mayor.
We'll come back. You know, here in Lake Forest, we've actually strived hard to come in compliance with the city mandates for recycling, and we're doing a fine job, and we're on that course to complete that. But you know, we are a green city, and not only because of the trees, but we are energy efficient. We are recycling, and so I want to thank you. And I think that we want to get a picture up front with us. Okay, enjoying the whole council. Okay, I'll come up. Thank you. We're doing our part not to fill up the Earth's landfill. One more. Okay. With that brings us to our student liaison from El Toro. Joseph, is this your last one for us?
I wish not, but or I hope not. But I think we have a while. I graduate in June
Okay.
23rd, so it's coming up.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, we always love hearing about El Toro, our favorite high school
Oh,
in
yeah.
South County.
The best high school.
The best high school.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Joseph Hunter, your student liaison, reporting in on Tuesday, April 21st, 2015. What If Week is full swing at El Toro. What If Week is a powerful, moving week created by our own activities director, Ms. Scheidler. We do it every year, last year being every 15 minutes. This week is based all around the question, what if? For example, Monday's theme was, what if we saw the best in everyone? That day, students participated in a snack time activity in which they would sit and stand up if they answered yes to questions such as, have you ever been bullied? Have you ever had words hurt you? Today's theme was, what if compassion was a verb? After watching a moving video about compassion, students in their homeroom brainstormed ways to be compassionate on campus, at home, and in the community. Before snack, ASB took all these ideas and hung them all around campus, where everyone could see their ideas. After, we were given these wristbands. You start off the day with a black side that says compassionate in white. Once you do a compassionate act, you flip sides to the white. It serves as a reminder to compassion it. Wednesday's theme is, what if we reconnected with humanity? And this day we watch a spoken word about how much of a grip technology has on us, followed by a humongous school-wide mixer activity. Thursday is, what if no one walked alone? Where in our homeroom we anonymously fill out a card that asks us what we struggle with: depression, anxiety, loneliness, etc. We have an assembly that day where Tyler Durham, the greatest keynote speaker I have ever heard, will talk to us. Finishing up on Friday, what if our love is louder? There'll be a huge school-wide surprise. You guys are my friends, so I'll tell you. For the past months, we've cut out happy faces and wrote every single student, faculty, and staff's name onto a happy face, and we posted them all around Snack, covering the campus. We hope that the lessons learned will resound longer for more than just 1 week. Not only is this the best tie ever, it has a story to it. I traveled to our nation's capital along with 41 others in Soundstation and Coralistics to compete in the Heritage Sounds competition. Between all the museums and monuments, we blew out the competition. Coralistics, the all-girl choral group, is in the concert choir section and scored a near-perfect score, placing them in the gold first category. Soundstation, a mixed group, scored silver second. However, the combined scores of both El Toro choral groups let El Toro win the Choral Sweepstakes Award. This award is given to the schools with the two highest scoring groups. Their scores are combined, and whoever scores the closest to 200, a perfect score, wins. And we simply did that. The Maestro Award went to El Toro's Amanda Gerhardt for her outstanding solo, and an individual award went to Joseph Hanna for being the best Lake Forest City Council liaison there. Tonight, our boys lacrosse take on the Stallions of San Juan Hills. Game time is 7 p.m. Boys and girls track takes on league rivals Mission Viejo tomorrow in a crucial league meet. Thursday, girls lacrosse takes on the Aliso Wolverines. Game time is 7 p.m. That's all for tonight, and until next time, this is Joseph Hanna signing off, and as always, go Chargers.
Thank you, Joseph. You always do a great job. And, you know, the red, white, and blue that you have, they're almost as good as the blue and yellow from Chargers.
Yes, sir, yeah.
All right.
Both are great colors. Thank you.
You know, it is, that we have a proclamation for April 22nd, and we're proclaiming it Earth Day here in the city of Lake Forest, and it's, or Arborist Day, April 24th. April 24th, and I think it's duly good to bring up a note that here in Lake Forest, we're doing our part to plant more trees. With the completion of our sports park, I think, if I'm not wrong, it's 1,800 new trees that we planted. 1,800 new trees in this our great sports park that we have there. So we're doing our duty as arborists for the City of Lake Forest. And so on behalf of the City of Lake Forest, we're proclaiming this for a Community Director Services, Scott, as Arborist Day. So thank you. And now that brings us to, we're convening the Housing Authority. At this time, we'd like to call to order the Housing Authority, which will run concurrently with the City Council. That brings us to public comments. At this time, members of the public may address the City Council or Housing Authority regarding items within the subject matter of the City Council or Housing Authority. No action shall be taken on these items not listed on the agenda unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person, an overall time limit of 30 minutes for public portion comments. Any person wishing to address the City Council or Housing Authority on any matter, whether or not it appears on the agenda, is requested to complete a request to speak form available at the door and submit it to our City Clerk, Deborah Rose over here, before being heard, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do. Dave Alexander, followed by Marcia Rudolph.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dave.
I haven't spoken publicly since college, so please bear with me. I might need an extra minute, if that's
Okay.
okay. I've grown up in this city. I've lived here since 1971. I own 2 pieces of property. I've seen a lot of changes, but nothing's quite affected me like last week when I was pulled over coming out of Rouse. There's evidently a new no left turn on to Trabuco. Are you guys aware? I don't know. So I made the turn, got pulled over. I saw the officer. I was not being defiant. I just did not see the sign. The problem with this was the sign. So I called the city. Actually, the day before I saw somebody get pulled over, I had no idea why they got pulled over. So I called the city, and they referred me to the traffic engineer. And the traffic engineer said all they needed to do is put up a sign. It, didn't say anything about visibility or anything. So I went back to see the signs, and they're literally this high. They're lower than the podium. I have pictures if you want to see them. And when somebody pulls up on the right, there's a car blocking those signs. So I see why I cannot see the signs. Because cars are constantly making a right there at rush hour, and that's when I came out. So I tried and asked the engineer. I got nowhere with him, so I talked to Tom Wheeler, got nowhere with him, and I wanted to talk to the city manager. I made a couple phone calls, trying to make a meeting with the city manager, with the secretary. I left messages. She never got back with me in 2 days. I went down to City Hall to make an appointment to see him at any time. I didn't care. And I was referred to the Sheriff Valentine and Keller. So it was kind of intimidating, but we had a meeting in a room. And they told me that they were proud that they got an extra sign added, which was just like willy-nilly put in the bushes next to the other low sign. They're both this high. Can't see either one of them. So I see why, people are getting pulled over left and right. I guess my question would be, and I know you guys aren't going to answer questions, but what is the rush to start pulling people over without, people have been pulling out of there for 20 years, and all of a sudden there's signs that you can't see. And I did some research. There's a manual, California CAMUTCD. There's certain ways you have to post signs, and they're posted all over that manual. They have to be visible. And the stop sign is supposed to be 7 feet tall. The stop sign in my picture is only 4 feet or 3.5. Not visible at all, barely. And I'm not talking about the stop sign, but even the signs below it are even lower, so you can't see them. And I don't know why everybody I talked to at the city didn't mention anything about signage. And I told them it was low. They didn't say it had to be higher. They just went along with all we need to do is post a sign, and that's it. And they particularly a lot of people coming out of there. So I'm pretty disappointed with that.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Actually, that was good that you brought it to my attention because I use that left turn out of there a lot too. So I'll check in with that and get back to you guys. So thank you. I'm sorry that you got a ticket on that. You can take that up with the courts if you want, but I'll find out what happened there because I'm a 35-year resident of Lake Forest, and I've made left turns out of that. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Marcia Rudolph, followed by Margie Matzel.
Good evening, everybody. I have 2 subjects today, so I'm hoping that if I go over just a teeny bit, the mayor will give me a little leeway. First of all, my usual vector control report. You have today a handout that I got from Vector, and I know it's a little bit longer and maybe a little bit harder to read than usual, but what I find interesting about it is there are 3 major vector issues that we've got, And these I can remember hearing about in history. Encephalitis. West Nile we hear about now. I don't think I remember hearing about that in my studies. And then malaria. And those three little nasty things are still out there and still causing problems. The main thing to remember is that keep your pool nice. If it's not, find out some way to fix it. If you've got a neighbor with a yellow or green pool, you need to report it if you can. We need to keep those things under control because those are some of the things that can bring the mosquitoes in to causing problems. And we are in the time when West Nile virus is affecting us. It'll be interesting to see what the count will be this year. Last year it was 7 deaths and 284 infections of West Nile. The second thing I wanted to bring up quickly are staff and council members have the privilege of going to workshops and also going to events outside of the city. It may be a workshop given by the League of California Cities or some other organization. And I think what we may want to think about is doing what Vector does. They allow their staff and members of the Board of Trustees to go to a number of events over the year and, paid for by Vector. And what they do is when you come back from that meeting, you present a 1 or 2 page summary of what you learned or what was really important, something from the meeting, which then is given out to the Board of Trustees and to members of the Vector Control staff. And I know that there are a number of events that staff goes to and that the council goes to, and I think it's important for our city, the people in the city, to have a chance to see what it is, not just a dry line on the agenda, but has a chance to see at least a page that says, I went to the such and such meeting and I learned X, Y, Z. I think that would be excellent. I think that would be good for the members of the council, for the members of the rest of the city, so that everyone has kind of an idea of what's going on when instead of just a dry line that says I went to the League of Cities or whatever. So anyway, that's just a hint. And thank you very much. And I give a great kudos, thank you, and all the rest of it, and that Steve Manning brought up. He has been a great asset to the city, and we're lucky to have him. At any rate, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Margie Matzel, followed by Jim Reichert.
Good
Mayor
evening,
Voights,
Margie.
Mayor Pro Tem, Hi, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmembers Gardner, Robinson, Nick. I'm speaking on behalf of the Kiwanis Club Lake Forest. Just really briefly, Kiwanis Club Lake Forest is a worldwide organization. Its motto is changing the world one child and one community at a time. I've been a member since 2007, and we actually have some people in this room that are also members. I don't know if I can mention it, so I won't. And I think it's okay. Anyway, here to talk about, it's the 100th birthday. It happened on January 19th of this year. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kiwanis. It was formed one club in Detroit back in 1915, even before I was born. And it has grown to an international organization, 18 million service hours a year, $100 million in charitable donations are given out. We're currently, Kiwanis International is currently in the works of doing a project called Eliminate. Eliminate is to eliminate maternal neonatal tetanus, which you're probably all familiar with. A mother has it, her child is born with it, and the child at the most lasts a couple of days, and the child unfortunately passes away. Kiwanis has already, International has reached half his goal. Our club itself has, thanks to Mrs. Elizabeth Smith, collected $1,250, which she sent in. Anyway, we support the Key Club at El Toro High School in Trabuco with over 100 members combined. That's the Kiwanis Educated Youth. We also support the Circle K, which is Kiwanis on the college level. So what we're asking to do is possibly, if maybe the city in some small way might be able to help us celebrate, our small club, but celebrate this international organization, which is almost 100 years old. Our thought was maybe put it in the leaflet, and I know that there's other really well-deserving organizations like Sir Optimus in the city, Relay for Life. But just wanted to present it to you. I know you can't comment, but I just want to present that to you. Our club itself has 7 new members this year since October. It's the biggest since I've been in the club, and they're all active members doing things. So anyway, just wanted to let you know I have just a brief history. I know you guys already have to read a lot, but I have just a brief one page. I know you have a lot to read about Kiwanis. I know some of you already know just about the history and how it's grown. So just want to let you know, and anything you can do to maybe a small blurb to let the city know that it's 100 years old and we are alive and really doing things like food drives, supporting the kids at Boys Town, with the help of community leaders like Joe Muscatella and all of you. Thank you very much.
Wait, Margie. I was at an awards ceremony for you the other night at Mission Viejo, my second favorite city, at the Norm Murray Center. Tell us about your award and that your honor that you've got. You were recognized as Park and Rec's
Maybe you can
Volunteer of the Year. So California Park and Recs, and so congratulations to you. We actually have a certificate from the city of Lake Forest, and we have a certificate for you from the city. I don't know where it's at this time. We will present it to you at a future time, but thank you for all the volunteer stuff that you do for our city. You know, you are the backbone of what we are as a city, because it's people like you that make such a great difference. You know, one of my mottos is I'm striving to make a difference, and you are always striving to make a difference, and you do such a great job wherever you go. And so thank you from all of us on the City Council, for the community of Lake Forest. Thank you for all that you do in your activism. We so much appreciate you. You are a blessing. Thank you.
Mr. Butch, if I may quickly, I just want to make sure that I'm crystal clear. Well, first of all, you said that we could not comment. No, we actually can. The council, over the years, probably intentionally conveyed the wrong message, that we cannot comment on your comment. Sure we can. There is no state law that says we can't. Number one, we cannot take substantive action, and that does not include the directive the staff do something as you wish. It's just substantive actions cannot be taken by state law because they have not been noticed. Anything else, by default, we can say, we can do, and we can address you. So please do know that for your future reference, number one. Number two, I am somewhat still not clear what it is that we can do, because I, for one, would love to do it on a personal level as well as in my council capacity as a council member. What is it that you specifically, if you can tell me, if not, you can tell me offline, what is it that we can do for you as a city council or as a city hall?
Well, we just thought just something, maybe a story in the leaflet about Kiwanis International celebrating their 100th birthday, and there is a Kiwanis Club in Lake Forest that is part of that international organization. Just a small story.
Okay, Mr. Donick, what does it take?
It's actually on our agenda for later tonight with our 5-year.
Oh, we can do that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think Andrew Hamilton wants to, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just going to say congratulations. So great work. Thanks for being a great volunteer.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And thank you for being there, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Jim Reichert.
Hi, Jim Reichert, Lake Forest resident. When I was the coordinator for the anti-airport campaign, Margie was also one of the biggest volunteers we had, biggest in what she did, walking neighborhoods, getting petition signs, sitting out in front of Home Depots, gathering what a marvelous person she is and a great volunteer. Anyway, the gentleman that was up here talking about the sign's really a problem, but what that sign does is put a hell of an inconvenience to a lot of people. All the people in Forest Creek, all the people in Serrano Highlands, all the residents of Park, you just go to Ralph's Market, you can't make a left turn. Now you have to go out Chinook, go through that light, go to Lake Forest, make through that. I did it yesterday at 3:30. It took me 4.5 extra minutes just to get through the light at Lake Forest. So I understand that it's a dangerous place. There's been accidents there. You can't see the cars too well coming. But during non-peak hours, 8 o'clock on the night, 12 o'clock noon, there's no problem making left turns out of there. Why not say, make the restriction during rush hour? Anybody that tries to make a left turn out of there in the morning and rush hour is foolish. But during the middle of the day, 8 o'clock at night, it's crazy. Why are we inconveniencing hundreds and hundreds of people every day? And you can always tell a bad law, like prohibition was a bad law. Look today, how many people make that left turn still with that sign? I saw 5 people at one time because they're saying, this makes no sense. At 12 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not a car in sight. I'm making a left. So I would suggest, again, because I've done this several times by email, why can't we just try it during non-peak hours? Let people make a left turn. Let's fix the sign. That sign, you can't even see it. It's terrible. Okay, thank you.
Jim, I've been a resident of 38 years, and I was not aware of that left turn. I would have got a ticket, too, because I was not aware of that, because I've been using that same left turn. So thank you. We'll look into that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
3 of my friends got tickets, and we weren't supposed to issue tickets for 30-some days or something.
Thank you.
Now we're issuing tickets.
Thank you.
Consent calendar item number 5, the certification of the warrant register, submitted by Director of Finance, City Treasurer.
So there's no further speakers.
We've had no further requests.
Okay, come on up, Bob. We know who you are.
We know where you live.
You're locking me out.
No, we're not. I just invited you up, so.
All right, thank you.
So you have your 3 minutes.
Okay.
The light will be on.
Anyhow, I've been gone for 2 weeks. I've been in China, flew into Beijing, and I had a government interpreter with me, and then I went into Xi'an, and then outside of Shanghai, where I left and went back to LAX. Wow, is there a lot difference in living conditions and everything compared to here? It is like black and white. One thing I noticed over there is that the seniors do a lot of exercise. They go out there, and I think they call it Tai Chi or whatever, and they do the exercise like that. I think we have it here, but not as much. And we should really push this. You see 70-year-old people, 80-year-old people out there in a lot better condition than we do here in the United States. It's some of these people walk 2 miles to go exercise. And they also have another little thing where it looks like a big badminton, like this, and they kick it up in the air constantly with their feet. And then also they have it where they kick it to the other person back and forth. I think maybe, when we have a senior center, we can, introduce more exercise deals other than saying bingo. It's just a suggestion. Also, I noticed that police do not have guns. There are no guns on any policeman in China. They march around, but they have their little ticket book, but everybody is unarmed. It's quite interesting to see the amount of people. Shanghai has about a population of 28 million, which is about two-thirds of the state of California, and they still somehow get along. I asked also about overstaying on visas and things, and they say, "Oh yeah, they have about 200 or 300 people, and we feed them, and humanitarian, and we send them back." And I said, "Oh well, we've got the same problem." They said, "Oh, how many people do you take care of?" I said, "Oh, somewhere around 12 to 20 million." And you never seen an interpreter's jaw drop. Figure out that we have that many people and we can't control it. So that was another situation there. Last, I'd like to talk about the last planning commission that I was at. It was a little disturbing. There was the point about the 30 acres out there and the 250 homes, and Baker Company had their spill about what was going to happen and everything, and then they let the public speak. And then after that, they let the SHAPE individual have a rebuttal. And he didn't rebuttal accurately to what a lot of people were saying. Like one person said something about batting cages, and he says, "Oh, well, that'd be ridiculous to have 30-some acres of batting cages," and that's not what she said. And I almost felt like we should have a rebuttal to rebuttal, because that was a little bit demeaning, I think, to the residents to let this guy come back like that, and how he was speaking to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is our last public speaker. Okay, what that brings us to the consent calendar, warrant registry. All matters listed under the warrant registry are considered routine and will be enacted by one vote. There will be no separate action, discussion of these items unless a member of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the warrant registry. Have there been any requests to remove anything from the warrant registry?
We've had no requests.
Colleagues?
I have, there's a $200 payment to Cummings and White. I recuse myself from that. Thank you.
Anything further?
I'll move the warrant register.
Second.
Cast your votes.
That motion carried unanimously.
Are we voting separately on the consent calendar for Housing Authority 1 and 2? Or is that in the consent calendar? That brings us to consent calendar. City Council items 6 through 13 and Housing Authority items 1 and 2. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be acted by one vote. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the City Council, Housing Authority, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Madam Clerk, have we had any requests from either of the City Council or Housing Authority consent calendars?
No, Your Honor, we have not.
Council?
10 and 12.
10 and 12.
I'll move the balance of the consent calendars.
Second.
Colleagues, please cast your votes.
That motion carried unanimously. Agenda item number 10, GIS software license agreement submitted by Deputy City Manager, Director of Management Services.
Okay.
Just a brief note, and then I'll move the item. I went through it, and I wondered why we were spending all that money, and I sent the city manager a note, and Deborah Rose came in and gave a demonstration showing me why we were spending all that money. So I just wanted to thank her, and I'll move the item with that.
Okay.
Second.
Cast your votes for item number 10.
That motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 12, summary vacation of Baffin Bay Drive for a proposed city-owned dog park, submitted by Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
That brings us, Councilman Gardner.
Okay, two updates for you on that. I don't think they were in the document you had. In working with Dave Belmer, which is always a pleasure, he managed to squeeze out some more feet, and that lot is so small, anything you can squeeze out is really good by eliminating the sidewalk in the back, so we have even extra room. And the way it was originally designed, they were going to mix the large and the small dogs, which was a potential for aggression and danger, and then they agreed to separate that. So the park is moving along even better than we thought. With that, I'll move the item.
Okay.
Second.
Colleagues, cast your votes.
That motion carried unanimously. Agenda item 14 is a public hearing, the disposition and development agreement and regulatory agreement with Families Forward for the sale and rehabilitation of the property located at 23201 Saguaro Street and appropriation of funds for the project, submitted by Assistant City Manager. This item is being heard concurrently with Housing Authority Agenda item number 3.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the Housing Authority and the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'll defer to Mr. Belmer for a presentation by staff on this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Council, and Chairman, members of the Housing Authority. As you know, this project kind of has a long history in the making. This particular piece of property at 23201 Saguaro Street was acquired by the Lake Forest Redevelopment Agency back in 2011. That acquisition was funded using the agency's low moderate-income housing funds, and those were funds specifically set aside for affordable housing purposes. At that point in time, the agency had an ongoing funding source of housing money, and the property was acquired to begin a comprehensive neighborhood stabilization revitalization program in which properties would potentially be acquired as they became available and would be undertaken with what in the affordable housing community is called an acquisition rehab, which involves usually a public agency acquiring the property in partnership usually with a nonprofit, and eventually the nonprofit either takes control of the property by lease or purchase and then operates an affordable housing project for the state mandated period, usually of 55 years. And those units then are set aside or reserved for what the state defines as income eligible families. That was our plan up until the point in time the redevelopment agency was dissolved by state law, as was every agency in the state of California. The property was then subsequently transferred to the Lake Forest Housing Authority in the hopes of preserving the project and the goals originally identified by the agency at the time it was acquired. And those there were many goals. Among them were to address overcrowding. Saguaro is comprised of 24 separately owned fourplexes, and there's a great deal of overcrowding over there. And at various times and to varying degrees, we've had police issues and code enforcement issues out there, as well as deferred maintenance. So the acquisition of the property and ownership or through lease or purchase in the hands of a nonprofit was thought to be a good solution for addressing those issues. We had to go through about a 2.5-year process with the state of California to officially transfer the asset from the agency to the authority. And all the while, Families Forward, who was selected through a competitive RFP to be the nonprofit partner with the agency, was patiently waiting for that process to conclude. Once it did conclude, we collectively reapproached the agency board about the potential of resuming negotiations to try to complete the project. Your direction was to do that. And so for the past approximately 6 months, we've been negotiating with Families Forward pursuant to direction from the agency board, and those negotiations have resulted in 2 agreements, which are before you tonight for your consideration. One is the disposition and development agreement. The other is the regulatory agreement. And we provided a very detailed staff report in your agenda packet that explains what those 2 documents do. In simple terms, the disposition and development agreement provides for the disposition of the property. The Families Forward will sell it to them. and it governs the process during the rehabilitation, which will be undertaken by Families Forward. The regulatory agreement picks up after the property is rehabilitated and determined to be complete, and governs the use, operation, and maintenance of the property for the state-mandated period of 55 years. In terms of roles and responsibilities, the Authority Board's goal was not to operate affordable housing, simply to acquire the asset and sell it and place it in the hands of someone that specializes in that, and that's exactly what we'll do. Our only other role is to provide funding for the rehabilitation, and we're funding that out of our housing in lieu fund, and those are funds provided to the city in lieu of providing affordable housing, and those funds are designated specifically for affordable housing purposes. That limits our roles. Families Forward, once the rehab, they will undertake, manage, and complete the rehab, and from that point on operate for 55 years at their expense, pursuant to very strict covenants that will ensure that the units are occupied by families of appropriate size for the units, that it's maintained in accordance with very strict standards, including the provision for capital reserve to ensure over the 55-year period its maintenance standards are held to high standards. Families Forward will actually purchase the property, and they'll pay $200,000 to do that, $100,000 cash and close. The second $100,000 is in the form of a promissory note that will be paid over essentially the 55-year term of the affordability covenant. Two things worth noting about the project: the previous funds used to acquire it and the funds that will be used to rehab it, as I mentioned, are specifically designated for affordable housing purposes. They can be used for no other purpose. And this structure in these documents fulfills one of the initial goals, which is that we would limit our role really to acquisition and disposition of the property, and we would not be involved as a housing authority in the long-term operation and maintenance of affordable housing. So we've accomplished those goals. So what's before you tonight are various resolutions that, upon your adoption, would implement the agreements here. And there are a total of 4 resolutions before you, one from the council to actually approve the development agreement, one from the Housing Authority to also hold, pursuant to a public hearing, to approve the development agreement, regulatory agreement. There's a resolution on the part of the City Council to transfer the funds out of the affordable housing in lieu fee to the Housing Authority so they can be used to fund the grant that we use to rehabilitate the property. There's also a resolution directing staff to file a notice of exemption pursuant to CEQA. This project qualifies for a categorical exemption. Families Forward is actually bringing in its own partners for this project, and those include Brookfield Residential, who, as you know, is currently developing a project here in the city of Lake Forest up on Auto Center Drive. And pursuant to their development agreement, they are paying affordable housing in lieu fees. Essentially, the funds they're paying into that account will in part be used to fund the rehabilitation for this project. And Families Forward is also partnering with Homemade, who is the nonprofit affordable housing provider of the BIA, who will assist Families Forward with the management and undertaking of the physical rehab of the property. And we have various representatives with us tonight from Families Forward and Homemade and Brookfield, as well as Felicia Costa from RSG, who assisted us in preparing the reuse analysis that was provided to document that the purchase price that's being provided is in fact a fair value given all the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that are being placed on the property. And we also have Sigrid with our BB&K with us tonight. She's the attorney associate, I believe, at BB&K that drafted the agreements for us. So that concludes my presentation. We're all here. We're ready, willing, and able to answer any questions you may have.
Council? Okay. Well, he's on. Council, you have any questions for David for the staff report? If not, I'm going to bring it up to public testimony. So, yeah, okay. If you want, can we have the public? Would you like to speak on to us on that?
Margie Wakeham.
Margie, we know it's been a long time coming.
See this gray hair? Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff, particularly Mr. Belmer, who we've worked with for a long time on this. Families Forward, as you know, is a nonprofit. We're located just across Bake in the other city to the north, your other favorite city.
My second favorite city.
Your second favorite city. And we've been around for 31 years. We do have quite a bit of property experience. We own 26 condominiums within the city of Irvine, and also lease from the city 2 condos here in Lake Forest, which we use for interim housing for families. We have look forward to this evening and hopefully to the groundbreaking and opening of this housing. We're optimistic that we can make a difference in the neighborhood, and that we will provide that affordable covenant for 55 years, which is a long time and probably beyond my scope and David's. I want to speak to the professional team that we have assembled and introduce them. They're here this evening, and so I want them to stand up and wave, and they're not here just to be recognized and to wave to you, but also to be able to answer questions if you have them. First, I want to recognize Gary Cohn from Mark Zakubo and his colleague Linda Fu. Gary is also a board member with Families Forward and a longtime supporter of ours. Gary and Mark Zakubo provided the assessment of the building I think you've seen. Mark Zakubo is a full-service consulting firm with expertise in all aspects of built environment, including property assessment and so on. He has been an invaluable partner, and Linda Fu as well, who is an architect with their firm. I also want to introduce Andy Suzuki, who is with Suzuki Design. Andy has done the as-built. This property is old, and there are no original drawings which are needed in order to make those assessments. And Andy and Mark Zakubo have both done this work pro bono for us. I also want to introduce John O'Brien and Luis Navarrete, who are with Brookfield Homes, Brookfield Residential. And you have to see John's socks. He's got some great socks on tonight, too. So, not to digress. But they have been very helpful in really working with us to bring their professional expertise and to provide the actual work that will be done on the property. Scott Larson is a longtime friend and the executive director of HomeAid. HomeAid is the fundraising and nonprofit arm of the building industry, as David mentioned. Families Forward actually was the first project for the HomeAid before it was actually HomeAid, and that was back in 1989. And one of the things that HomeAid does for all of us in the social service housing of families and individuals is they bring together pro bono members of the trades, of the building trade, to provide their expertise either at no or low cost. And so it really makes the work that we do more efficient and more cost effective. So we really appreciate Scott. And then finally, I want to recognize Madeline Montoya, who is my colleague at Families Forward and is our housing resource manager. And Maddie has been just invaluable and knows all the details of this. And one more person, Mark Kiner, who is with Vicini and Lagoni, which is an architect firm that will be helping with the finishes within the homes. So that's really what I want to share with you. I want to invite you to ask questions if you have them. If not tonight, whenever you know where we are. And we really are looking forward to this partnership with the city. It has been a long time, and we will have wild celebration when the first family moves in. So, thank you.
Well, I'll start it off with just can thank you for what you do for our community, for the residents of Orange County. You know, we live in a very affluent area, and people don't realize that there are people struggling, and you know, you guys do reach out and help those. And so, thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for the team that you've assembled. And you know, our apologies that there was a lot of to go through with the dissolving of the redevelopment agencies, and so it did make it hard. And so you know, you put together a great team to help us navigate that too. Because the fact is that, you know, as we were looking at the renovation and all the things that we have to do as a city, you actually made it softer and easier for us. And so thank you for that, and thank you all partners for what you guys do for the families here. And so with that, I open up to councils for questions.
Yeah, I have some questions for Mr. Belmer. You can sit down, thank you. And I agree with the mayor. Family Forwards is a great organization and marvelous for the city. But I'd like to make some things clear, because I believe there's a cautionary tale here for the spending of public monies. And if I make an error as I go through this, please stop me and correct me. When this goal was enabled to stabilize the neighborhood and to deal with overcrowding in this neighborhood, we the city invested $925,750 in buying this property, correct? And we're now selling the property for $200,000, of which $100,000 is a cash, and then $100,000 paid over 50 years. So we're losing approximately $700,000 in the sale of the property. We are then spending on rehabilitating the property, another $400,000 on that. Might be $350,000, but it might be another $50,000. So let's say worst case scenario, $400,000. We're then spending $223,000 to relocate the people who live in those 4 units. Were they being relocated to Costa Rica or something in the Hilton? No, obviously not. I hope not. We're then paying, in addition to those, so we're up to about $1.5 million now. In addition to that, we're paying half of the escrow fees, which I'm not sure what that is, and we're paying customary seller fees, so we're into, let's say, for between $1.5 and $1.6 million is going to be the cost to the city of generating what at the end of the day will be 4 affordable housing units. Okay, that's all accurate. The other way that affordable housing units could have been developed was by requiring the developer themselves to build affordable units, rather than giving us the money, which then we see what happened to the money they gave us. So moving forward then, because we will be faced as developers come before us, some of them may ask to go down this route that has already been gone down so far and give us in lieu fees in which we can engage in similar projects like this, or we are able to say, nah, we've been there, we've done that, we'd rather that you develop the affordable units rather than give us the money, because we may not be able to use the money as effectively or as efficiently as possible. Would that be accurate?
Well, Mayor, members of the council, certainly there's policy there, and there's also facts. The facts regarding the cost, that's a fair assessment. But maybe some clarification. The agency's original purchase of the property for $925,000 approximately, as we mentioned in the staff report, was funded through the agency's low and moderate income housing fund. So true, we paid $925,000. We paid what was then the appraised fair market value of the property, assuming it would continue to operate as it had been, which was market rate housing. And so, just to understand, I guess for the public's benefit, why would we sell an asset we bought for $925,000 for $100,000, which is being financed? The answer is affordable housing is expensive. That's why. Because if I purchased it as market rate housing and continue to operate it, I would be charging rents between $1,700 a unit and $1,400 to $1,500 a unit, which is what those residents are currently paying. When it becomes affordable, those rents will be cut in half. And so the bottom line, affordable housing is expensive. The relocation, there is a cost to relocate the existing tenants. In so doing, we're alleviating the overcrowding. Let me back up. The $925 that we used to acquire the property, I mentioned agencies' low-mod housing funds. We acquired that at a time in our agency's history when we were faced with what's called excess surplus, meaning we had more than 4 years' deposits in our housing fund, and so we're kind of facing a situation where we had to spend those monies or give it back to the state, or potentially worse, give it to the Orange County Housing Authority so they could spend it in our city as they deemed appropriate, and we didn't think that was in the city's best interest. So we felt those funds needed to be spent, and we identified Saguaro as a good opportunity to do that because we realized we had existing problems and conditions there, so we could solve maybe two problems with one bird, so to speak, by using our money, alleviating our excess surplus, and putting ourselves on a path to try to create affordable housing there that would address the various police, code enforcement, overcrowding issues we were having. On the relocation, you mentioned there is a cost to relocate. That's unfortunately a necessary evil anytime you do an acquisition rehab, because usually when you do an acquisition rehab, they're occupied properties, and that triggers a relocation obligation. In this case, though, we're fortunate enough that the $223,000 is being funded by the state of California. We were able to preserve that money through our agency dissolution process. So if we weren't using the money to pay for the relocation, it's essentially not our money. It's the state's money we're using there. The escrow fees, which was one of your points, are expected to be nominal. The $425,000 we're transferring out of the Affordable Housing in lieu fee fund. But that $25,000 of that $400,000 is a set-aside money for some escrow expenses, so we expect them to be generally in that range. We spoke earlier, right, about when an in lieu fee may be appropriate and when it's maybe more appropriate to require those developers to put those units on site. And there's a lot that goes into that analysis. A lot depends on what type of units are being constructed on site. Certainly, if it's rental housing, like was done on the Shea project with the Meta development, those are apartments. And it was a lot easier or more efficient to provide those affordable units in a rental environment than it certainly would be in a for-sale home. When you go through that analysis, in order to buy down the cost of that home to make it affordable for someone that's qualifying under the definition of low to moderate income, you essentially have to almost give the home away, which can be very troubling for a developer and can be a disincentive for the development to occur. And that's where the policy issue comes in. And I think the previous council and this council has implemented both. We've done affordable housing on site through the Shea project. It will be done on site through the Portola Center development. The two smaller OSA developers, Whistler Ridge, that's done, and Gary Emzek at Peachwood will also pay an in lieu fee. But again, he's building 3,300 to 3,500 square foot homes, where it would be very difficult to provide those units on site. So I think the council, what the council is really doing is implementing that general plan goal of trying to provide 15% affordable in all new developments. And it's really been done on a case-by-case basis through that balancing act. And so in the case of Saguaro, we're able, though, to use those affordable housing in lieu fees, we think, to address issues on Saguaro Street and deliver the affordable housing through someone who makes their living doing affordable housing and will know long-term how to operate and maintain them. So the numbers are correct that you recited there. But whether that should have been handled by not taking those in lieu fees and providing the units on site is really a policy question that the council previously has decided should be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Anything further? So are we going to vote for these one? Yeah, we'll close public hearing at this time. So, okay. Councilman Robinson.
So, Mr. Belmer, just to clarify, if we didn't spend this money, then it would have gone to either the state or the county, and then they would have probably spent it in our town without our own control. So essentially, this is a local control issue for us. Is that correct?
Mr. Council, that is certainly true on the monies that were originally used to acquire the property and the monies that have been set aside for the relocation. The affordable housing in lieu fees that we're using to fund the rehabilitation, those were paid to us by developers for affordable housing purposes. So if we don't use them, we might expect the developers at some point to come back and say, if you're not going to use my money, give it back to me.
Sure. Okay. I just want to let you know I appreciate what the staff has done to implement both the previous council and the current council's policy with respect to all of this. I think that you've done an admirable job. It's been really challenging in the midst of the dissolution of redevelopment agencies, and so I just want to commend you and the rest of the staff for what you've done. From the policy perspective, I continue to believe that it's best for us to look at this on a case-by-case basis, and for some of the reasons that you've stated. Also, I think that it can be a challenge in the community for both the surrounding residents as well as the resident who's occupying affordable housing to be stuck in the middle of a development. And this has been an issue that's been very important for me. I think that once you start looking at someone who's in need of affordable housing, they're in need of a lot of things, not just housing. And so if we were to pop them in the middle of, say, the Shea development, their access to bus routes, their access to grocery stores, their access to medical, health care, and so on and so forth, become more challenging. So, I think that we need to continue to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and I'm going to be a strong advocate for that. And again, I just want to commend the staff. I know when you look at the numbers, like you said, affordable housing is really expensive. And it's one of those mandates that comes down from the state that tells us exactly what we need to do. And there's not a good way of doing it. I think that the previous council put together a very good policy to make sure that we did it this way so that we're basically involved in the acquisition of it, but not the continuation of operating it and trying to keep it in place. I think that's best done at the private level, at the nonprofit level, and so I'm very excited to be working with Families Forward. Again, sorry for the amount of time that it took, but I know that you're going to do a fantastic job with that property. I'm also encouraged by the strategy that was put in place to focus on Saguaro at the time, and I really hope that this is a harbinger for some redevelopment of that street and improvement of it. And I think that this is a great first step, and hope that we continue going down that road with whatever opportunities might come into play, whether they be public or private. So I don't know if any of my colleagues are going to have any other questions, but with respect to the agenda item itself, it's in 4 pieces. Do you want us to make a motion individually or all together?
Mr. Mayor, council members, these items really stand as a whole, so it makes sense to move all 4 resos as a whole.
Okay, and we're moving from both the Housing Authority as well as the City Council agenda here. So
We'll hold that.
Okay, great.
Mayor Pro Tem Andrew Hamilton.
I guess I just have some comments. And first, Family Forward, it was a great tour. Thank you, Margie. And the other gentleman, I've forgotten his name, but we're making eye contact. Thank you. I really appreciated our time, and I thought it was a great opportunity to see and hear some of the experiences and the skill set that your organization brings toward families and those in the situation that they're in. So I applaud you for coming out and being a part of this process. Staff too, I think that, there's been a lot of hard work on this, and so I think there's a lot of things to go around in some praise. This is not something that I am very enjoyable in kind of discussing and even going through, as Councilman Robinson mentions, it's a state mandate. And I think it's important that we do things as a community. I just don't like the state mandating that. And some of the requirements that they've had are related to how we are spending our money. And so if there's public funds, that we're required to have prevailing wages, for example. And so I just think that there's just so many state mandates on us, and someone's mentioned local control. I wish we had more local control on these types of issues. I'm going to go ahead and vote for this, but I just, I really want to implore, at least from my vote, I'm 1 of 5, going forward, that we minimize the tentacles of the state and the control that they, to limit that control as much as we can in the future. Like I said, there's, we are where we are, and I'm going to vote for it, and it's not a penalty against Families Forward for the state in their laws and things that require us to use those public funds or prevailing wages in spending public funds. So with that,
I'll entertain motion.
I'll move staff's recommendation for items 1 through 4.
And that's for item number 14.
No, second. And so we're doing 14 and 3, is that correct?
No, 14 would be separate. And 14, all 14.
All of 14 and then 3 from the...
Yes, Councilmember Robinson's correct. You're doing item 14 on the council agenda, all 4 items, as well as all 4 items are on number 3 for the Housing Authority simultaneously.
All right. Okay. Gentlemen, cast your votes.
That motion carried unanimously.
Thank you for your patience with us. We want to come for the ribbon cutting.
Agenda item 15, public hearing to consider amending citation amounts associated with the wildlife ordinance submitted by city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the City Council, I'm going to defer to Mr. Tomaino for a staff report on this item before you open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Council. The city's wildlife ordinance, as you know, became effective April 16, 2015. On the same day, the Parks and Recreation Commission held a public hearing to determine whether Village Pond Park is at risk of being overcrowded. And so fundamentally, the Parks and Rec Commission found by a unanimous vote that a Village Pond Park met that criteria, and therefore, as of May 2nd, 2015, the city may begin to actively enforce the wildlife ordinance. The wildlife ordinance citation process is currently tied to the city's administrative citation ordinance process, which means that the city is required to track specific instances of the violation and on an escalating fine schedule, meaning that if an individual is found to be in violation of the ordinance, they might receive a warning followed by a $100 citation, $200 citation, and ultimately a $500 citation. At this point, we've identified some challenges for you in the staff report relative to the wildlife ordinance, because in particular, what occurs is that out there in the field, in the park, it's a whole different environment. And so fundamentally, if you're trying to cite people based on the Advent Sites ordinance, you really are encountering a different situation from a code enforcement violation, which is typically tied to a property address. And so it's more easy to do that, right? The second issue that we've identified in the report is that there is some difference in the types of violators, per se, with the wildlife ordinance than you might find with other instances of violation of the code. So, as we've said, you would find, for example, grandparents and parents out there treating this as a family activity, or generally people that don't understand that this is a violation of the code and that may be harming the park, the welfare and health of the animals, and other problems that become associated with that activity. So for those two primary reasons, we're recommending the City Council at this time consider amending the citation amount in relationship with the wildlife ordinance and adopt just a $50 citation. We believe that that would be a more effective implementation of the ordinance when it comes to that, and we're happy to answer any additional questions on this item. Thank you.
All right, well, so I'm going to open it up to the public. So open up this public hearing for item number 15, amending the citation amounts for the wildlife ordinance. Public hearing opening, so we'll take testimonies from the public. Is there any?
We've had no requests to speak.
Okay. Then I'll close the public portion of this agenda. and I will bring it back to staff or council for questions. I guess I might, if you don't mind. So we're looking at not having escalating dollar amount on the fines, and that's due to trailing or verifying the fact that continued violators would be getting a higher citation. That would put a burden on our staff and the city.
In part, yes, Mr. Mayor. What we're trying to solve is we're trying to make it more effective to implement the ordinance. So what happens today, as I said, is if somebody's out there, the current citation process is I would have to track. I know that you have violated the ordinance once and maybe or do just a warning. But this gentleman here has violated it twice, and so they're due a $200 citation. That's a very complex piece of management to occur out in the field. You also have to understand that some people aren't even potentially carrying any identification. So in a mobile environment such as a park, it's a different process to try to implement that ordinance. The other issue that we've identified for you is the proportionality of that citation versus the actual law that's being broken. So in staff's research, what we found is in cities that did have a higher amount for their citation, let's say $150, $250 or higher, the actual number of citations that were issued was very low, in some instances none.
Yeah.
And so the actual citation process was, in some ways sort of discouraged, not actively, obviously, by anyone in particular, but I think that amount, if you're issuing somebody a $250 citation that seems disproportionate to the crime that's being committed, there may be an argument by members of the community that that's not quite fair, perhaps.
Thank you.
How did we? What was the rationale for coming up with $50 specifically?
Well, that amount is something that we came up with. Frankly, we thought it was a reasonable number. I looked at what some other cities did. For example, I found that the lower thresholds were $50 and $75, maybe up to $100 for instance. And we're offering that as an initial suggestion to say, well, we believe that $50 is a fair number. So if you were to receive a ticket for leaving your car parked out on street sweeping day, that's approximately a $50 fine. So we thought that would be a reasonable amount.
Okay. My real focus in all of this, and I believe that it was of the entire council, but it's really to try to change behavior of people out there any way we can. So we're continuing with the policy we have with citations of education first, trying to make sure that the offenders really understand the reason why this is occurring, and we'll continue that with this here. And I just hope that the $50 is something that has an effect but isn't too significant. I mean, nobody wants to get a $50 ticket, that's for sure. But it's not. We're never going to generate enough revenue out of this for what we might spend trying to enforce it. Every time an officer goes by that park and just spends a few minutes over there, we're going to spend more than $50. So, and if they don't write a citation during that time, so this isn't about revenue recovery or cost recovery. This isn't about generating revenue for me. It's about changing behavior. So, I really would like to try to track this, see what kind of impact it has, and how things go forward here. So, it'll be. I know we've got a really weird situation going on with the park, in that we've got a closing coming up anyway, and so we'll see how it all comes out in the wash here. But I'm encouraged that we might be able to start helping change some behavior again. First with that educational process, and it'd be great to see some impact there. So,
Council, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think everyone in this room, and probably if you took a poll of every citizen or resident in the city of Lake Forest, they'd agree that there's an issue with this park. I'm just not a big fan I'm not a fan at all of this ordinance, and wanted to see it sunsetted because I don't think it's going to do anything. And I think a great line from the staff report is at least one other community, no citations were issued. So I kind of have a feeling like this is just, we're spending a lot of time on it. We are, there's an issue, but how can we correct it? And I'm not sure if this is the right way, but, so here's my question. On the fiscal impact, it says there's a minimal fiscal impact associated with the recommended action. And so, I think as Councilman Robinson mentioned, is that truly what we feel, that there is going to be a minimal fiscal impact? And if so, what can you define minimal? As in with dollars?
Well, that recommended action is relative to the action that you're taking this evening. Obviously, if you're reducing the citation amount from what it is today, there is a fiscal impact that's unknown. It really would depend ultimately on the number of citations that were actually issued out there to quantify that number. We don't feel, though, that it's an exorbitant number. So, like I said, we'd have to determine the number of citations that were issued to give you an actual quantified fiscal impact. But that number is generally reflective of the fact that we're changing the citation structure from anywhere from a maximum 500, which is probably unlikely and requires additional tracking even to get to that point, to a reduction of $50. So there's a nominal difference there in the per instance citation likely over whatever aggregate number of citations would actually occur. Does that make adequate explanation?
Sure. I'm just curious maybe if there's been any analysis done on how much time police services will spend on this and how much time staff thinks they'll spend and all the costs, and then maybe here we're expecting to issue 10 tickets a year, and at $50 that'll be 500. And another concern that I have too is in no way do I ever want any of our police services personnel, responding to a call at the Village Pond Park and taking away from safety, human safety, from other calls in the city. And so I think that's another concern that I have, and I think we definitely have a problem with the geese and the ducks, but I don't want to see, how is the call to 911 going to occur? Are they actually going to roll a sheriff deputy? Go ahead.
Well, as you may recall from the previous discussion on this item, the direction from the City Council was to have opportunity-based enforcement relative to the citation. So, of course, anything that implies that there is some health risk with residents in our city, obviously that's not related to this, would have to take immediate priority. I could, of course, we could ask that question to the chief, but I would assume that would be the answer to that. If there's an immediate situation that requires the sheriff's attention that threatens human life and safety, that would take immediate precedent over this.
Councilman Gardner.
Questions. We've all said, we're interested in education and warning and not fining people. That being said, there's really no point in having a fine that has a minimal impact. Imagine if you were talking to the police and said, well, let's give them a traffic ticket, but we want it to be a small ticket. We don't want to follow up. We just want to slap their hands. The reason the $100 was selected is that's our cost. You were asking what the cost were. In earlier studies, it costs $100 to go through all this. So the $100 was set originally to at least retrieve our costs. And it's been said before, I don't understand, or I don't know why you don't understand, but everyone has said we're not interested in getting the grandmother who's out there with their grandchild giving a cracker to a duck. That there are maybe a dozen, maybe at most 20 people who show up in cars, open their trunks, who have, stale bread. And these are the people. In the same way, if you're doing 65 miles an hour in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, a police officer may not, in fact, stop you. It's looking for 70, 75. In the same way, we're not expecting every grandmother in the city to be worried about the police swooping down on her. So there's a lot of things here being said that I don't understand, because most of the people we're concerned with are the people who show up in cars. We really don't have to worry about identifying the people. They're in a car, the same way you would arrest anybody who's in a car. You can take their license number. So again, I don't see the problem created with that. And again, I don't seem to understand. What's the problem with you can't track? We've got iPads coming out the yin-yang that our staff use to track a citation in a water heater down on some way. So I don't think it's a technology problem. If it is a technology problem, I don't know why we're spending so much money on all the technology and the software we're using. So I can't imagine it would be a major problem. Finally, we've asked that it run through the administrative citation program. And, if there's some way to come up with an alternative, I don't particularly want to use police either, but if STARS could be used or some other method could be used, that is our preference. So I honestly don't understand a thing about this, what you brought up. None of it makes any sense to me. And I would prefer if we stayed with the 100, what we approved originally.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, if I could inject a bit, I guess. The issue is that it's the real-time tracking in the field in order to give somebody a citation or not versus a warning. Because they're not necessarily going to, I'd say, perhaps admit that they've been warned before, so this time please give me a ticket. So the staff needs to create some sort of system that someone live in the field could access mobily to determine whether or not there's a database in which this person's name exists in order to ensure that they're getting a ticket or not getting a ticket. So we believe that is certainly not a capability we have today. It doesn't mean we can't develop it into the future. What we believe, and I think Mr. Tomalino talked about it, is that there's a couple of reasons for setting, not necessarily escalating fines, but making it a little bit easier administratively to deal with by just setting the fee rather than watching it escalate and trying to keep track of that. And it also has to do with the issues related to proportionality that he talked about in terms of, well, just how much does it need to be? The staff made the recommendations as to this amount as Mr. Tomalino explained. However, I would also inject that the council can put any number you want into this resolution. You can make it 100, you can make it 500. Also realize, though, that we are only talking about the administrative fine. If, in fact, a deputy sheriff issues a criminal citation for this, it's a misdemeanor violation according to the municipal code. That's a whole different matter that has different implications related to it. So the actions you're taking are only for the administrative fines. They're not for criminal violations. Those are set aside. As we all know, misdemeanors are ordinarily punished by up to a year in jail, or depending on the amount, I'd have to refer to the chief these days as to what that is, but it's usually about a $1,000 fine. So remember, you've got two systems that would be in place because of the action that you took with the ordinance in which you put into place. Consequently, the staff's recommendation is that we obviously would be looking to modify the process as it relates to administrative fine, whatever the amount the council so desires. Councilmember Gardner mentioned $100. That's the return. I'm not sure that's the return if we have to build a system that tracks it all the time. It certainly would be an instant where we're dealing with the first time for a violation. So if the council so desired, change it from $50 to $100, if that's what you believe is warranted at this juncture. In that resolution tonight, conversed with the city attorney, you have the ability to do that. You can put whatever amount you so desire in the resolution, change it. If you think it warrants something higher than $50, the recommendation by staff, again, I won't be redundant, to Mr. Tomalino indicated. Also realize that from our perspective, all the things that Councilmember Gardner said, we certainly agree. We don't believe that the discretion of a deputy or anyone out there in the field is going to go after and cite people constantly because they're doing that. Education will be first. That's what we need to do. We're already putting that into place. We have an educational program that we're going to roll out. We have an article that will come out in the leaflet. We have flyers that we will have the STARS as well as our park ambassadors go out and educate people with first. We hope we never have to give a citation, that the education program is by far much more effective and efficient. In the instance, though, that it is not, the council has chosen to enact an ordinance that makes it a crime to do that, and we can either use a criminal violation or we can use administrative fine. I think officer judgment at the time is going to dictate what occurs, be it either a code enforcement officer who would be only doing an administrative fine or a deputy sheriff who decides to do one or the other. We certainly don't anticipate that you're going to see a vast volume of these things that will occur. We know it's going to take some time to educate. We believe it makes good sense to let that occur for a while. It doesn't make sense to go out there next week and start citing people. It makes more sense to let the education take place over some extended period, and when you do have egregious violators, officer discretion in the field will determine whether or not someone needs to be cited or not. Just because they see someone doing doesn't mean they're going to cite them. At least that's not ordinarily what even occurs with criminal violations of the penal code, when a deputy is out there citing someone for a citation for speeding or not, or whatever it might be. So I want to ensure that you realize you can set the amount to whatever you so desire, but also our emphasis is on education, and it won't be on the enforcement, but we are prepared, because the council's enacted an ordinance, to implement it in a fashion that we believe is the most efficient and effective way by which to do that, taking into consideration those issues for administrative tracking as well as proportionality.
Thank you. We've got a huge amount of money going into the renovation of Village Pond Park, and I think that the date, the closing is end of September, October, and possibly earlier.
We will, at a certain juncture, Mr. Mayor, come back to the council on this project and offer some suggestions as to how that might roll out as we watch the education process take place. But we're also very cognizant of other concerns that are going on statewide with droughts and how much we're watering that park today just to tear it up, or how much water, potable water, we put into the pond. So that's an issue. I think that's a good conversation for the council into the future. At this juncture, we anticipate that the project would probably in great earnest start in this fall, but it certainly could be sooner if in fact there are other issues that the council deems appropriate at the time. We're not prepared to bring those forward at this juncture, but we do think there are some issues that you may want to consider.
Okay, so what staff's recommendation is, and just to save the burden on the staff and tracking, that go do away with the tracking. We make the fine whatever we want to make it, but do away with the tracking, because the fact is, I truly believe that when the park is renovated, the way that we design them is going to deter the geese from flying in, and I think the concentration of wild geese and other birds will be limited. So I will open it up for suggestions of maybe what you guys want to make the fine. I mean, obviously, if we've got to go into a tracking and come forth a project or a program that would enable the city to track, that's going to add to that $100 fine. So I'd be happier if we just went with the $100 fine.
I'm happy with the $100 fine and no tracking, and I don't, to avoid the burden of questioning everybody about, did you get a warning? Then let's just have a 30 or 60-day warning period, and after that, it's fair game. But the importance of having the fine at least $100 is, if you have insufficient punishment in a situation like that, it won't have any impact. So $50 may not be enough, but $100 certainly. Most people are going to feel the $100. Many people might not feel the $50. So I'm happy if you want to eliminate the tracking, go with a 30 or 60-day warning, and keep it at $100. I'd be happy with that.
And in the hopes that we never get to that point, because of the education program that we will put in place. Councilman Nick?
Actually, I think we just got what I wanted to suggest a couple of minutes ago. Given that our cost is about $100 according to Dr. Gardner, and given that we don't really want to make money off of our people, let's just do $100 flat all across. This way we recoup our cost. Hopefully we will accomplish the objective, and at the same time it has served as a deterrent to the individual. Not to mention what Mr. Donick said makes perfect sense, which is tracking it. I realize technologically speaking, it shouldn't be that difficult. Dr. Gardner is correct. The technology is there to track it. However, getting that information once you're in the field and doing it in real time, that may pose a challenge, and I'm not sure if it's quite worth it. But $100 across the board should be a good number to start with. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and while the iron is hot here, I would like to agendize what City Manager Donick has just mentioned about potentially the council exploring closing it early, some of the comments that you mentioned.
Yeah. Well,
Mr. Members of the council, if there's certainly council consensus for the staff to do that, what we anticipate at this juncture is that while the staff has been granted the authority to simply release the plans and specifications for bidding, that given the significance and the sensitivity related to this project, we're going to bring the plans back one more look with the council. I think that's an appropriate time in which we might be making recommendations that the park actually close earlier. So that would be our intent. If that's the council's satisfied with that, we'll schedule it as we get a little closer to the time frame where we think the plans might be ready to come back, and that's probably we suspect within the next couple of months at the latest.
The only comment I have with that is I'll be kind of talking about this later, but the water use, it's starting to get measured June, and so if it's possible that you could come back before June, I'll kind of talk about this later, but that would just be my humble...
If council's desires, we could separate it from the conversation related to anything in terms of the plans and specifications themselves and just bring that issue if there's interest. We can bring that sooner.
And I just, like a sentence on the staff report, I mean, that's all really it. Nothing extravagant.
so can we get consensus now? Put that, yeah, we have consensus. So, so do we get consensus on a fee amount? Move this item. I'll take a motion.
I was just going to move the item and incorporate the $100 fine flat all across, irrespective of the number of occurrences for the same individual.
I'll second.
Gentlemen, with that, you want to call your vote?
Substitute motion, just staff recommendation of $50. I think we should keep it there.
You know, for the amount of hopefully the lack of usage of this, I could second his motion, but I'm not a huge fan of fining the people for feeding the animal. But the fact is that it is something that's way out of hand at this park, and obviously we're contributing to the breakdown of the environment in that park, and so I'll second that motion. So I'll call your votes for.
If I may just make a quick comment, I don't understand. If our cost is $100, how could we, in good conscience, issue a ticket for $50? So are we going to fork up $50 of taxpayers' money for the wrongdoing of one individual? I don't understand. Not to mention, as of about a minute ago, I thought we all said 100. If 99.99% of the people had nothing to do with that incident, why are they chipping in to come up with the other $50? It's you do the crime, you pay the penalty, and I agree, $250 is excessive. Not to mention the progressive rate is not. This is feeding birds. A progressive rate, 150, 200, 250, 500. That just sounds like the Middle East. It sounds like arbitrarily ripping people off. $100, I think it's fair in the respect that it recoups the tax dollars, it recoups the expense that is paid by tax dollars, and I think it's just a fair number, but, okay, thank you.
Councilman Robinson.
Yeah, I don't believe that the $100 gets anywhere close to recouping our costs. If we have officers out in the park just for a few hours a year, and we only issue a few citations, we're going to spend a heck of a lot more than that. So I don't believe we get anywhere close. I don't know where the $100 number came from. It might be something that was in a previous staff report, but I don't think that we get anywhere near close to recouping our overall costs. It might recoup the cost of that specific ticket and the administrative costs, and I would assume that's how the staff was calculating that in their fiscal analysis, but it doesn't recoup the overall cost of the ordinance. I don't think we get anywhere close to it. And again, my focus is on education and then making sure that we can change behavior. I think we're going to do it with $50. A lot of us are not going to be happy about getting a $50 fine for feeding some birds. So if somebody's going to go out every single day and feed a bird and get a $50 ticket, they're probably not going to pay it. We're going to have to put a lien against some of their property, right? They're not going to go out there and just continue to get ticket after ticket after ticket after ticket. I think that the vast majority of the people, when they get a single ticket, their behavior is going to stop. Then maybe over a period of time when there's no enforcement, because things have improved, some people go out there again, you go through the same process. But, I just think $100 is a little too punitive, and I don't think we get close to recovering the cost. So that part of the argument doesn't really hold water for me. But thanks.
I think you swayed me into going for the 50. I share Councilman Nick's cost, but I wasn't a big fan of this in the first place. So I think the education is more important. So I think you've won me over.
Okay, with that, I'll call a vote. Councilor.
This is for the substitute motion.
Substitute.
Yes.
Which is staff's recommendation.
That motion carried with Councilmember Gardner opposed.
Okay.
Agenda item 16, updated discussion regarding the ideas generated during the 5-year strategic business plan workshop submitted by City Manager.
Okay, with that brings us to the City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, you're taking the next step in the process that will result in an updated 5-year strategic plan and actually also a 2-year CIP that the council will consider for final adoption when we bring everything back to you in the month of June. This is the second step in the process that's actually started with a workshop that was held actually earlier here this year with former members of the City Council, the Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, and of course the existing council. That meeting I thought was very productive. It resulted in a great number of ideas and suggestions from all of the members. I thought we had great participation. That meeting focused on the city's core services that are identified actually even further in this report, but it was on public safety and infrastructure, recreation, leisure services, planning, building safety, economic development. The workshop participants offered their opinions and suggestions and other feedback relative to those core services, and I think that the participation and the feedback that we got from those who were that evening was all very positive. So it's a new process that we started this year. As the council might remember, we've done that differently in the past, but we thought this time a more interactive dialogue that would generate a lot more, I'd say not only enthusiasm, but reap a much more, I'd say, quality sort of process and ideas that the council might consider putting into your new strategic plan. because of its relationship to the planning process, the staff's also presenting tonight what we would consider to be the base conceptual ideas and projects that we would put into the 2015-17 capital improvement projects budget. You'll see that when we come to you in your first budget workshop here. That'll be out in the early part of May. We also are presenting tonight the whole list of ideas that were generated. There's like 172, if the number, don't hold me to that, I'll have to look on my iPad as well as you. But it's a great number of ideas that were generated. Some of them were duplicates, but also you had, interestingly, some people having absolutely different viewpoints about the same item. Some saying you should do this and some saying you shouldn't. So it was all a very interesting outcome. This evening, we're presenting those to you without doing any real analysis, because the staff believes that it's, much as we have done in the past, rather than trying to do extensive evaluation on 170 ideas, that the council give us further direction as to those things that were discussed, that were identified by the participants that you believe either should be put right into a new draft 5-year plan, or should have greater analysis and evaluation for its potential inclusion in the future. And by that, what I mean is, if you have something tonight that you know collectively you really care to do, we would put that into the draft, but also we would evaluate any additional costs associated with it. However, if there are some ideas that you find you'd rather know the numbers, the fiscal impact first, then tell us that. We won't put them automatically in the plan. We'll bring them back to you as a side listing so you can consider those further when this item comes back to you as a first initial draft. This evening, because they did such a terrific job last time, we've got Mr. Neves and Mr. Tomaino who are going to help us track the conversation that the council would have this evening about each of those, where our recommendation is that you go through the same categories. We've provided each of these ideas that we received, you received collectively from all the participants in those categories. We think it might be appropriate for the council to, for example, first look at all of those that were generated as it relates to public safety and identify for the staff those that you believe are appropriate to either get into the 5-year plan initially or need additional analysis. They'll memorialize those, and what staff is seeking this evening is, after you've done that successfully or successively for each of the categories, that we will have then collectively the council's consensus as to the ideas you want us to further evaluate in one fashion or the other. We suggest you first do public safety. That's the first one up, and set that sort of a menu of items you want looked at. Then we move on to the next one, and so forth until we've gone through all of those categories. Collectively, then, what staff's looking for is the council's majority consensus, your vote as to the items that you emphatically want us to study further and bring back to you at your next draft. And of course, if there were ideas that were not included in that list, and the council members since have thought, well, there's something else we maybe ought to that didn't get there, you want to identify that tonight, certainly you're free to do that. You're free to do that all the way up to the time where we really need to finalize the document. So it certainly is a process that I think is always evolving. Bear with us. It'll be the first time that these gentlemen are going to try and make sure that we categorize well. We're all going to take notes as to what your dialogue is suggesting that we should take this in direction. And of course, Mr. Mayor, I believe there are speakers as it relates to this item. You may want to do that. And then the staff will be glad to answer any questions that you have related to any of the ideas that are generated or any direction that you want to provide us.
All right. Well, then we'll start off with public speakers.
Jim Rosenberg.
Council, staff, thank you, Mr. Dunick, for your comments, which absolutely echo my feelings on the strategic planning session we had on the 21st. Having sat through a number of them over the years, this was without a doubt the most productive, the most input, the most interaction, and a great way to start off. And thanks to Mr. Dunick facilitating it, and everybody who gave input and to put it together the way it was, a great job. And special recognition to the two gentlemen here who qualify as expert in computer typing and transcription. I think it was a very, very worthwhile event. One quick comment on one of the items, item number 97. This is like the NFL draft that will start next week. The 97th draft choice, which is under the Parks and Leisure thing, which was the consideration to be given to the 25th anniversary celebration coming up in 2016. What was transcribed was one half of, it was a two-part thing. The only addition I'd like to suggest, which kind of wound up on the cutting room floor, I think, was that that would also include a special event on the 4th of July at the sports park as a venue, where we could do just 1,000,001 other things, just offer it up for consideration, hopefully positive. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody further?
No further speakers.
Okay, we've got a lot on our agenda as a city, and I think that when you look at the city survey states that we have a high approval rating by the city, and we've got not only a future civic center, a senior center, the Village Pond Park, we've got Whispering Hills, we've got Normandale, we've got the Portola Park site, and there was one other one. We've got a lot on our agenda, so there's a lot of great ideas here. Some that we're already enacting, and then some that we haven't really enacted yet. But I just want you to bear in mind that you, as council members, that future costs and are going to be high, and so just keep in mind that when I'm voting for things, that it's got to be utmost important to us. And none of these items are the items I'm going to throw away, because I think that they'll be brought up in future years too. But I think that we just have a huge amount already on our plate right now, and what the previous planning commissioners and city council have agenda. We've got a lot on our table, more so than any other city in Orange County. So with that, I'll open it up for public safety. This is where we're first starting. And remind you, to get it on to the agenda, we need to get a consensus of 3 of us. And so suggestions, anything in? Yes, Councilman Robinson.
As I look at a lot of the comments that were made, there's a lot of explore, maintain, continue, analyze, things like that. So they're not really a lot of capital improvement project kind of, we're going to spend some dollars. We might be spending some staff time on some of these. So, but from things that I'd like to see some basically a cost analysis on, that really the only thing in public safety for me are the first one with respect to body cameras. And I don't know what the current sentiment is within the Sheriff's Department. I know that the City of Fullerton has recently moved forward with that. I just looked nationally at some of the issues that are affecting law enforcement today. And, I think that there's a benefit to providing this for both the citizens as well as the officers. It's just my personal take at this point, but I don't know what kind of cost we're looking at, so I'd want to consider that first. So when we're moving forward with the draft, if I could get 2 of my colleagues to agree, I'd like to at least explore what that cost is and see if it's something that the Sheriff's Department might be willing to have us put into either a 2-year or a 5-year. So, or maybe not at all. I mean, I'd like to kind of get all that feedback, because right now it's just really my media intake and then my own personal thoughts with respect to this, but I'd like to get more information. So.
I'd like to direct this to Lieutenant Valentine. Has Orange County Sheriff Department started looking into cameras. I know that, I think I was with the sheriff at a meeting not too long ago, and she says that she didn't want to be the first out because there's some of location purposes they're not really worked them out where they best plan them or put them yet, right?
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the Sheriff's Department is in the process of doing some beta testing on body-worn cameras. We were not the first out in the county, as we wanted to make sure we found a system that was compatible with our existing software and technology, so we didn't have to spend the funds to go out and buy a whole new system. So we are in the process of moving towards body-worn cameras. I don't have those cost figures on me here this evening. If I remember correctly, some of those costs were covered under the current MDC and PBS charges that have already been collected, but I don't have those exact numbers. But it is in the process.
Mr. Member, members of the council, let me add to that. Yeah, I've heard the sheriff talk twice now about this issue. The mayor and I were at a meeting in which he did bring this issue up because there were other city representatives who asked that question and also have the same interest as articulated by Councilmember Robinson. The sheriff wants to ensure that they do it correctly and is looking at a variety of systems, as the chief has indicated. What we could anticipate in this issue as it relates to the cost is that the Sheriff's Department will allocate those costs out through our contract. And so at this juncture, I know that what we'd be concerned with, and we'll work with them closely on, is just how much will that cost. We're not sure right now, clearly, but there will be a process in which then we'll see that on a per deputy basis, would be my thought, as we could anticipate. And obviously that would have contractual implications into the future, certainly an issue that we're all more than aware of. But we'd be investing in technology, much like there's been an investment in the Southeast Substation. So you'd see some impact. We're not sure what it would be right now, but this is an item that I think has a life beyond just Lake Forest. The Sheriff's Department would want to implement this on a universal basis in their department.
And I guess that's just my main focus, is that we don't end up too far down the line as it's being implemented. So I don't know if it would be implemented all in 1 year or if it would be spread out. I just want to make sure that when it does move forward there, that it occurs here. Because again, I think there's a benefit to both. Personally, I just think there's a benefit to both the officers as well as the citizens. And it's unfortunate what we're seeing at a national level right now. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you all do each and every day. And I can't imagine having to do that. So, I want you all to feel, as safe as you possibly can be when you're out there interacting with the citizens. And I want the citizens to feel just as safe. So that's really my thought process there. But other than that, I really didn't have any dollar expenditure comments with respect to the public safety issue, so I'll leave it to the rest of my colleagues.
Yeah, I echo Councilman Robinson's comments and sentiments. That's the only one that I saw, too. Nothing else. I did read an interesting article on body cameras, and I think that in the Wall Street Journal, my favorite newspaper, which discussed about the storage issues of data, and just the massive time and storage, time to review the files and staffing that's related to that, along with the transfer of data and storage of data. So I think as long as the sheriff is investigating, and it sounds like everything's on the right track from what I hear, in addressing those issues, as I'm sure she is. So.
And Mr. Mayor, just quickly, to Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton's point, the sheriff explicitly made that comment. This is data retention that is a huge concern and a cost implication.
Yeah. Nothing on public safety, and then I'm moving on.
I find it hard to believe. I'm sitting here listening to what I'm listening to. We're about to be faced with a $500,000 or $700,000 a year additional increase in our police contract. that is, literally going to blow away whatever that difference between the revenues and the expenditures are. And I don't know why, as part of our plan, we're not looking intensively at police services, at, how are we going to be able to staff the new housing? How effectively are we using STARS? STARS, which is a marvelous cost savings for us. We're not looking at that. We're not looking at the joint use of other cities and sharing staff with other cities. I believe I gave you a copy of the Laguna Hills report, which dealt lots of those things, in which there's possibly $200,000 worth of savings. So you guys are interested in cameras. I'm interested in the enormous hit we're about to take in police services and looking at that and doing something about that. That's got more financial implications to what's going to happen in our city than the body cameras. So how are we going to deal with those kinds of issues?
The cost elevation in police services due to our supervisors is actually because of the fact is the sheriff department had not a raise for a long time, and they actually got a raise. And the fact is they have to pass it on to contract cities. But when you look at surrounding cities, and I think you brought up Irvine one time, Irvine actually has a higher pay salary than what and costs than we have here with what we have with the sheriff department. So I think that I like the idea, and it actually was, I think, my idea to possibly expand the STARS program, because we have one van that works during the day, and I'd like to see possibly, if I get consensus, if we could get the cost and the ability to actually staff another van that would actually patrol the parking lots and the school grounds, the parks that we have, and actually would be more eyes in the field for us. And so that was actually mine. And so if I get consensus to bring that back, I would like to do that. But the cost of police services is not due to us as a city, and there's not really much that we can do about that.
I'm not blaming the police. I'm not blaming us. But the fact of life is this big hit is coming our way. If you read the Laguna Hills report, they had all kinds of creative ways in which they thought they could partner with other cities to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. They talked about the use of motorcycles and the savings involved in using or not using motorcycles. They talked about a whole variety of things. Seems to me we need to be looking at ways in which we can control that enormous hit that's coming our way.
So, and let me bring that back to the city manager. Would that not be something that we would bring up in our budget discussion coming up?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, certainly in terms of the implication for this first year budget increases we anticipate from the Sheriff's Department is certainly an appropriate conversation then. The issue I think that Councilmember Gardner is talking about potentially is there something beyond the instant increase that we need to be doing proactively in other ways by which to address that sort of long-term implication that we see. I just received the third estimate from the Sheriff's Department, and as I've shared previously with all of you, at times annually we get the first estimate. It's usually pretty darn high. We get a second estimate. It gets further refined in a third estimate. The third estimate is significantly below the very first number that we received from the Sheriff's Department for a variety of reasons. I am crafting a memorandum that I will send to the council to give you some of the background very briefly, because we have now reams of paper from the Sheriff's Department about how they calculated the things that they did. I also, in this memo, will be reporting just back briefly to the council what occurred at the meeting that was convened by Supervisor Bartlett back just the other week that the mayor and I attended. She had worked with the sheriff as well as all the mayors in South Orange County with the city managers to talk about basically how did we get here, what's happened since those first numbers came out, and I also think importantly what we might do as it goes forward. Now, I would share that from my impression, our ability to change our service provider, for example, between now and the end of the fiscal year is impossible. You can't do that in 1 year. Anything would take several years by which to try and get that actually implemented. But the goal is, as I shared with the those who were assembled in that meeting, is we need to get the immediate increase this year down as much as possible, and it has decreased significantly. It went from an initial about 10.5% increase to right about 6.5% increase today. And so I'll be sharing those numbers with you when I send the memorandum out. So it's still a significant number, though. I'm just telling you what the percentages are. It's still a very large number.
Less bad news.
Well, it's less bad news. That's correct. I guess you could say it that way. The one thing that occurs is that the Sheriff's Department uses cost allocation models for the variety of things that they're providing collectively to all of the cities. And so they're going to treat all of them individually, but really those allocation models are done as a whole. So all of us are affected in a similar fashion. And they have reduced the numbers significantly. We certainly would like to see them lower, but generally, when you look at the work that's been done, the Sheriff's Department, collectively with the work that's been put into it by the finance directors, collectively with the cities and the managers and the Sheriff's executive staff, have decreased the number. What we really need to do over the long term, in my judgment, and I shared this, was we need to look at the service model and maybe perhaps make some improvements to the model itself. It's probably one of the best ones, if not the best in the country, in terms of how you do this as a contract city. But it doesn't mean it can't be improved. And we need to look at that collectively, because the Sheriff's Department won't deal with it, I think, on an individual city-by-city basis. They want to provide consistent service across all of their contract cities. So looking at the model itself and how it's delivered is a conversation that would need to take place with all of the other contract cities in order for it to be effectuated by the Sheriff's Department. And that process will take place over the course of probably the next year or so. The Sheriff has already agreed to create a regular process where her finance people meet periodically with the finance directors from each of the contract cities and go through all of these issues in more extensive fashion, and that there is a committee of city managers that will work with the executive staff to look at the service model to see if we can't make some levels of improvement. So I guess to look at both issues, the number for this year on an overall basis, collective impact on the cities, is down. A process to look at it long term is in place, and it may very well include, I'm not sure at this juncture, but it may very well include hiring collectively a consultant to help us, much like the Laguna Hills hired the Matrix Group. Certainly not in evidence today, but it could actually get there, in which that we're looking at it from that perspective. The other way that you will see some cities that will deal with the impact in their jurisdiction that they believe isn't accommodated by the overall decrease is service level reductions. So they will reduce the amount of police, law enforcement personnel may be assigned to their city. They'll figure out some way by which to do that. You'll see some variation that way in different jurisdictions. There's certainly some talk about motors, for example. But while that was a recommendation for a potential thing for Laguna Hills to do, they haven't done it. They still have motors. They have other issues that they're looking at in terms of sharing staff, but they're fundamentally looking at what they charge the city of Laguna Woods to help share those costs. We have, for example, in Lake Forest, shared sergeants with the city of Rancho Santa Margarita. They believe we were the greater beneficiary of that split, but we paid equal amounts. They decided not to do that anymore because it was, in their estimation, they weren't getting the return on their investment. I have had conversations with the city manager of Mission Viejo to look at, well, where could we do that? So all those things are going on. I think the issue is do you want to put it in your 5-year plan for all the things that we might be doing otherwise, or do you want that process that comes out of the efforts by the city managers collectively and the finance directors over the course of the next year to unfold and give you a better sense of all the things that you possibly could do long-term to deal with what has been a fairly consistent increase in police service costs. We know that. But clearly, as the mayor indicated, they got an increase in salary this year. They closed their labor negotiations. A good portion of what we now see in our increase over last year is related to the cost for personnel, the increase in their salaries, and all the other sundry issues. And so that's the majority of what you're seeing. There's a few others that I'll identify for you in my report. Don't have it this evening for you, but you'll get more information as we go. So if you want to formulate something for the 5-year plan, you could. If you want to wait and watch that develop a little bit more, you could always include it at the future time that we will look at this plan again.
Yeah, I'm not sure it has to go in the 5-year plan, but I'd like to get consensus to task you on getting us some cost reduction. I don't believe we should be in service reduction, but if there are ways that we can work with Mission Viejo, I spoke with their mayor and their mayor pro tem not so long ago, and they were very interested, in the idea of being able to do something to share costs because they get hit even worse than us. So it doesn't need to be in the 5-year plan as something we put in the 5-year plan, but it does, if you can save us $200,000 by sharing a sergeant or 200, et cetera, that does ultimately come back for the 5-year plan because that will impact our budget.
I can support what you're saying. I just think that it's a reiteration of what direction's already been given to the staff to try to focus on cost reductions whenever possible, to try to look at staffing levels. So is that fair to say that you kind of have that standing direction at this point?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Robinson, I believe. We understand that. We're actively pursuing it. And I know that my colleagues in the other cities are all actively pursuing it as well. And that's why there's a committee of city managers, smaller group, that's going to be working with the executive staff of the Sheriff's Department to look at the service model as well as other ways by which we might be able to reduce those costs, as well as getting that number down this year. So honestly, I think we've been successful. Whether that number's still low enough for us is something that you can take a look at when we bring the budget workshop to you. I would say that the number that we saw initially, I know that Mr. Neves included that in our projections for what the revenues over expenditures would result in, already accommodated what we saw as a much larger increase than what we know we will now get. So that number is probably going to increase just a little bit for this next year.
Just in general, I feel like, I know our role is the policy-making role, and your role is the administrative role, and I feel like that direction's been given. So, but again, I have no problem with reiterating it, and I just want to make sure that we all focus on that. When we look at, some other alternatives, really, I feel like Board of Supervisors dropped the ball a number of years ago, and I could go into it for a long, long time, but I'll save and spare everybody the time. Most of you are probably already aware, but there's a lot of issues that they did that have impacted costs to the level that they are today, and I'm frustrated by that. Not the current board, but a previous board. I think that when we look at cheaper alternatives, and this was part of the discussion that night, that there really aren't cheaper alternatives. So I think that it's just pretty intuitive. I don't want to spend time and resources analyzing something that I already know isn't going to be fruitful. So I just kind of feel like that's a waste of staff time from that perspective. Part of an increase in public safety is going to be tied to inflation and CPI, right? So it's personnel costs. Everything is increasing. Our home values are increasing. Costs of goods are increasing. So, of course, their pay has to increase just like everyone in the private sector. I think the number, and we talked about this a little bit, and this is something that might be, I think is worthy of a discussion at some point, is percentage of the budget and that allocation. That's what's really most important, because if property values are rising and sales tax is rising, our costs are probably going to rise along with it, right? But if the percentage of the budget starts changing significantly, then we know that the cost of this service, regardless of what it is as a contract city, isn't in line with our increased revenues, right, through inflation and so forth. So that's really the number that we should be focusing on, and I'm fine with having that discussion again. My only focus was just from a cost perspective. That the body cameras was the only thing that I wanted to talk about from that area. But other than that, I think at some point I wouldn't mind having a discussion about percentage of the budget that we would spend on public safety as a whole, and just try to figure out where we feel like comfortable. And when we had that meeting there, we had our strategic plan meeting. I think the staff did a great job of laying out each of the categories that we focus on. And they focus on public safety first, and then infrastructure, and then recreation and leisure, and then I'll lump the rest of it into city administration, right? I think that's how residents focus in the city. They believe public safety is most important, right? Now, if we don't have a cheaper alternative than working with the sheriffs, and the sheriffs are doing a great job, if we don't have a cheaper alternative, then in lowering our costs, we have to look at how can we be a little bit more efficient. I think the staff already has that direction. They're doing everything they can. Beyond that, it's lowering the level of service so that we don't spend as much, right? And I think that that's a community-wide discussion that you'd want to have, because when I moved to South Orange County, one of the reasons why my wife and I picked this community was because we believe South Orange County, and specifically Lake Forest, is a safe city, right? It's a great place to raise our children. So personally, I want to make sure that we have a significant expenditure of funds on maintaining that level, right? Percentage of the budget, good part of the discussion, but that's number one paramount issue for me, right? And so, I like how you laid it out, and, I feel like, the staff is doing a good job of trying to maintain and control our costs as much as possible. I know the sheriff's department, they don't they don't want people exploring other options and, seeing things, start to fall apart. They've added a city. They've added Yorba Linda recently, and that's what they'd like to do. They'd like to have probably some economies of scale so that they can help reduce some of their costs, maybe reduce increases, maybe not reduce costs, but reduce increases moving forward as they become more efficient. And so, I'm sure that they have that goal. Our staff has that goal. And so, I'm supportive of reiterating that, and I think you have consensus for that. And other than that, I'm good.
I was just going to mention that, so thank you for stating all those items you just did. I think in our conversations, everything that you said, nothing was new there. I'm also concerned about this issue. I trust our chief negotiator, and I've talked to him, I've talked to the sheriff, I've talked to her top brass, or retired chief, many others, and I think this is an issue that's very important to our city too. And one of the reasons that you mentioned Yorba Linda, one of the reasons why they won that is that according to state law, the sheriff can't increase and charge us extra and add a profit into that component, whereas cities like the city of Irvine, and it ends up the city of Brea was doing that, increasing their profit by recovering more than their cost in their contract with Yorba Linda. So I think those things have been explored, and that's all I've got.
So we got consensus for that, but I want to put it in the 5-year budget, just as maybe a topic of update of where we're at. People, I can't tell you how fortunate we are to be the new home for the Saddleback substation here in South Orange County. It's going to increase patrol time in our city significantly. It's going to bring forth a huge presence of police cars in our city, because Mission Viejo, Santa Margarita, unincorporated are all starting here in Lake Forest. And so if you drive down Rancho Parkway, you'll see the line of police cars along Rancho Parkway. They're all starting here. That's where the lockers are. That's where they're actually suiting up, and that's where they're having their briefings. So we've got a huge presence here in Lake Forest, and we're fortunate to have that, and we're fortunate to have the Orange County Sheriff Department. So I'll close that and go on to our next Public Infrastructure.
Just to add, if you drive by there, there's not just a couple cars. It's like a lot of police cars there.
And if you notice all the Lake Forest cars along the street there, it's a it's a great thing to see, because I was driving up to this sports park just the other day, and I saw 2 cars leaving the parking lot with Mission Viejo logos on it, and thinking, oh, there goes my second favorite city, but they're driving to Lake Forest to go to work. And so it's a huge benefit for us. Before starting in Aliso Viejo, where the other current south substation is, it was at least a 30-minute drive to get started to work and patrolling the streets of Lake Forest. And here, they come out of the parking lot, they're in Lake Forest. And so we're very, very fortunate on that. So public infrastructure. Oh.
No, just very quickly, Mr. Voigt, which all of this begs the question, where do you guys fill up? Where do you guys go to gas up? Because I surely haven't seen an increase in my revenue.
Okay. Public infrastructure. Gentlemen, have you gotten through the list? Is there anything that compels you to put anything added besides what we have? And noting that we read through the report, you saw all the things are already on our CPI capital improvement project and our 5-year.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. In this area, have questions. I guess is the best way to say it. And so, I guess we're kind of flipping back to that 2-year, I'm going to kind of reference that to the 2-year capital project plan draft for 15-16 and 16-17. And so, it's difficult for me to just see like those numbers there and the comments. To me, it almost starts with how much money do we have. So, we've got Director of Finance Keith Neves. He's got how many funds? Like 10 funds ish, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And so I would want to see how much we've got in each fund, how much revenue that we're expecting over this period of time. Then you can kind of see, okay, how much do we have to prioritize? It feels like I don't know. I don't feel like I have enough information to be able to really see. It was interesting. In addition, I think. Hold on, I said we're not in recreation leisure yet. No, but I guess this kind of relates to it. We had a discussion about the Whispering Hills, and there seemed like there wasn't this is an example, I guess, of what I'm saying. And so the Whispering Hills, I know I'm kind of dipping into recreation leisure, but there's capital components to it too, and it just seemed like the Whispering Hills, there wasn't a good consensus. It felt like they were evenly divided between garden people and I don't know if the dog park fans and soccer arena, and it kind of felt, I don't know, it felt disjointed in that if we have limited funds, which obviously we do as a city, just how much do we have to be able to move forward? And it felt like it was just kind of like the next thing on the agenda, where maybe there would be another opportunity to do something somewhere else. If we had more money, or if we didn't have the money, then that would be the spot. It didn't seem like that was kind of addressed.
Mr. Members of the Council, just to that point, the staff is working now, obviously, on finalizing the budget that we would be submitting to the Council for your first workshop. And the information you're seeking will be in all of that, clearly. Tonight, what we're suggesting is if there's anything that you see on this list that you want us to get some numbers for so that you can look at it when your budget workshop occurs and see it in context and say, okay, all right, I kind of thought about that. What did it cost? Could you project that for us? And then when you look at the budget workshop, you'll have the numbers you're talking about. What are the fund balances? How much money do we have? What do we already have committed in order to allocate out any additional projects? Tonight, you're not really approving those projects. You're just asking us to go get some information for you. And if you think that something absolutely needs to occur, then tell us that. But otherwise, our anticipation, particularly as it relates to your CIP, is give us some idea of what the costs might be so we can look at it in a broader spectrum. We as staff thought it might be appropriate just to, because you had a whole list of things here that you got from folks, is that you see what we've already anticipated might very well be part of a recommended CIP, at least as a baseline that the staff's been developing, predicated on things that you've already approved, things that are in the pipeline that we think are probably good, and certainly within the parameters of what we believe that those fund balances are. But tonight is just to tell us if you think there's anything else to look at and get the numbers for you. We'll put them in context at the budget workshop.
Councilman.
So I guess from some of the previous discussions that we've had to talk about infrastructure, I think there's a decent amount of interest from up here in traffic. And so I just kind of looked through traffic funding on the 2-year, and the biggest item that popped out to me was probably number 6, the big Parkway, Portola Parkway modification for Litham. I don't know if I am excited about the Portola Parkway widening streetscape dollar. I don't know much about the project. So it seems like there was a little less emphasis on traffic as I looked at this. And again, I know a lot of it has to be related to grants. You know, there's that whole process, but I don't know. I just didn't see as much in the traffic mitigation as I did. That would just be my first comment about infrastructure.
As it relates to the traffic issue, that's certainly, as we know when we poll, that we know what the community believes is incredibly important, public safety. Are there issues, the biggest problem? Well, okay, we know that when you finally get down to an issue, it's traffic. Remember, however, that, for example, some of the things that you see in the current CIP include, and our carryovers are like traffic signal synchronization. So when you look at what we're suggesting are adds, they're adds to an existing list of all the other things you're already doing. So when you look at traffic and transportation as a whole, it's a much bigger plate than what we suggested could be added this year. All right, so you're already doing traffic signal synchronization, and it's a big portion of the costs associated with what you'll be spending your money on over the course of the next couple of years.
But are they capital? Are you saying they're being spent and they're currently an expense, or they're capital?
They're in the CIP.
Yeah, capital improvement.
The capital improvements. Some of the traffic signal synchronization is a capital investment because you're needing to buy new controller boxes or pull wire or whatever it might be, and also the cost associated with the programming that relates to it. So it's always been budgeted in the CIP.
So just to follow up on what you're saying that it should be on page 383 on the 2015-16 and 16-17?
No, that'll be,
those 2 years?
It's carryovers from the existing CIP.
Oh, okay. Carryovers, got it.
Right, it's carryovers. You've got all those projects already on your plate. That's something that we'll bring back to you as well when we bring we're not necessarily out of sync here. From one perspective, though, is we ordinarily haven't brought a draft of your 5-year plan this early to you. What we're looking for is early feedback from you so that we know how to further develop our budget proposals that are coming to you in the next couple of weeks. So we're busily writing all of that. So this is just a check-in with you at this juncture. If there's anything that we're missing out of a new CIP that we didn't anticipate, we wanted to share with you what we're thinking. If we're missing something else that's new, you'll get the whole list of the things that you're already doing.
Councilman Robinson.
I think the question I have right now is, so as we're looking through public infrastructure, there's a bunch of items here, and which ones do you feel like you're already doing? And then I guess maybe we could see if someone feels like that's not enough. I mean, when I look at the first one, as an example, develop community outreach programs to provide input regarding traffic issues, including Lifton. I feel like we're doing that through the leaflet. We did 3 forums last year. Like, I feel like we're already doing that. I don't know the individual that popped this in, but it doesn't say develop more. It just says develop programs. I feel like we already have it. So I'd say, we're checking the box. So when you go down through this list, I mean, what do you feel like we're not checking the box? Because I'm just looking at, what are projects? 'Cause I feel like a lot of the comments that were made, develop a master plan to replace illuminated street signs. We have a plan. Now, whether or not we want to put more money to it might be an issue, but there is a plan in place. We've got $10,000 in this year's budget, $10,000 next year's budget. I would assume that it kind of moves forward throughout, so the question is, do we want to put more money towards that? But we're already putting something. So what do you, is there anything in public infrastructure you feel like we're not doing right now
that we ought to be doing, or that was raised? Because that's a different issue.
No, that was raised. Not
okay.
That, no,
right.
Ought to be doing should be coming from us, right?
That's right. That's why I wanted to make sure I was clear about that. Well, clearly, we're already doing traffic signal synchronization, so that's a given. It's a long-term project that actually is I think already showing some results. Outreach programs, you're already doing that. The council's already created a traffic ad hoc group. You've already done that. Traffic patterns around schools, we do it all the time. And if someone thought by this that we don't do that, or gee, we need to do more, but we're not trying to read things into what people wrote, but we already do that all the time. And coordinate with the Transportation Authority to improve bus service. We talked to them about their bus service. This might have meant more, but we don't control the bus service. We didn't take this to be, well, the city needs to create its own bus system. That's a whole different issue, I would suggest, but we do work with the Transportation Authority as it relates to the bus service and the routes that they do here in town. Improve traffic flow towards the Interstate 5 freeway, of course, that's always an issue. That's what we've done. The improvements to El Toro Road, for those who remember that street before it actually was improved, it didn't flow as well as it does today. Is there still congestion? Of course, there always will be. You can't build the street wide enough to eliminate it all at the peak times that occur. But we do know through analysis that it flows considerably better, and also the traffic signal synchronization will do that. So those are efforts already underway. I would almost say that anything you see in this list that relates to improving traffic patterns, easing congestion in this community, we're already doing them. The issue is there something else that you thought we're not doing that we ought to be, is the question to you, I guess.
Yeah, and that's just more of what I wanted to get at. I felt like we are already addressing a lot of these. Now, if people want us to spend more, do more, that's, a different story, but I feel comfortable at the level that we're moving forward with. If there's probably one thing that jumps out, and it's not specifically listed here, but I do recall Mayor Voigt's mentioning it. He talked about some signage, and I think specifically, was it Lake Forest Drive?
It was Lake Forest.
Going towards the 5 freeway?
And El Toro. Just see, and Mark and I think we talked about that just the other day. Putting signage up that say these are the on-ramp lanes for the freeway, just so the people aren't at the last minute moving.
I actually looked for that the other day going down El Toro Road, and I did see it on El Toro Road. One could debate, I guess, whether or not it's sufficient and its exact location, but they have added some, but I'll let Mr. Wheeler talk about what he's doing with the balance of them.
Yes, since that comment made several months ago now, they've been installed, both on Lake Forest and on El Toro. We added, I believe it was 2 signs for each of the streets.
Great.
So if you need anything more, please let us know, but they're in place.
Thank you.
Great. I figured it'd be a minimal expense, and so just seeing what impact there is. One other thing that's popped up, I don't know really what to do with it. We've talked. I think this is more like coordination with Caltrans, but the like coming out of Green Thumb and Arby's, and I've talked to Doug Anderson about it. I may have talked to you about it, but I know that the Chevron gas station right there, El Toro, getting onto the 5 North, they've talked to me before about, backed up traffic there, in front of their business and stuff. Some of that's just nature of the location. But, we've talked about the weird situation where you can get on the 5 North either making a right or going straight across El Toro, right? And so, I don't know what improvements, is that more of a Caltrans thing, just because of the location?
Yes, Caltrans is looking at a major reconstruction of that interchange, and it's in the early conceptual studies right now. Several $1 million, flyover bridges. They're looking at I don't know how many different alternatives. But that's it. On the small scale, I remember those conversations. We've talked with the Chevron dealer down there, and encouraged them to call us because I believe that we had some issues with the controller and the detector at those times. So as soon as he contacted us, we were able to change out and fix it. So that's part of what we're trying to do in connecting all of our systems electronically so we can monitor them on a daily basis versus waiting for the phone call and the complaint, sending the tech out there, look at it, fix it, and like that. So we've been in contact with him a lot. Haven't heard from him for months, if not about a year.
On a micro level, we're addressing it, but on a macro level...
There's some big projects in the works that...
Yeah. Okay, to look at it from more of a technological standpoint rather than being there physically.
We try to do both,
yeah.
Right? We try to squeeze everything we can out of the existing infrastructure, and then we look at the bigger projects, too, of the widenings and the big picture projects.
Okay, all right, great.
All right, then we're moving on to recreation leisure. Gentlemen, please, starting at item number 75. I'd like to continue and just leave on the arena soccer facility, the community garden, and the future dog park. Just says to keep that on. If I can get consensus on those, I think that reaching out. I think that here it says consider a partnership with private sector, PetSmart. I think that would be included in it, but I'd like to keep that on the 5-year. So if I can get consensus on the, I think that U.S. Soccer said they actually help fund arena soccers too. So between PetSmart and some of the others, I think that there's possibilities there. So if we could get consensus, just keep that on future 5-year.
Specifically the arena soccer and what else?
The community garden and the dog park.
Okay, and those 3 are already in our 5 years.
So they're in the 5-year plan as it relates to Whispering Hills as a facility potential site. If the suggestion is you want it in there regardless of whether it's Whispering Hills or it's another
Normandale.
Yeah, if you're looking at other sites, then I think that's a little bit of a nuance that's different than what's in there today. So if you want it to be sort of those 3 issues as services, regardless of location, are the things that we would want to continue to look at for any of the venues in town. Then that's a little change, I think, than what we would have in there today.
Okay, well then that's what I would like to include it, because I think that even if we were, no matter what we put in the Whispering Hills, there will be grading done there, and with that grading, that excess dirt there can be trucked over to the Normandale site. I think that we can look at it and maybe see the bigger picture then when we start combining the remnants of our park sites together. I think it's worthy of future discussions.
I want to support that and go you one step beyond that, in that I'd like to know what all these spare pieces of property we have, spare may be the wrong word, but unused pieces of property that we have all over the city, the railroad track by El Toro, Whispering Hills, the Normandale, etc. I'd like to know how much they would get us on the open market. It's been suggested, I think, by the Parks and Recreation at some point. It came up there, it's come up in other questions. Maybe we sell Whispering Hills and we use the money to develop Normandale, or maybe we, etc. So not just not sticking them to a location, but considering what we do with all those locations. And there may be a location that's better to sell, there may be a location that's better to develop, so let's think of them, but think of them everywhere, and think of anything up for grabs.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe I understand what Councilmember Gardner is talking about. We certainly have an inventory of what we own. One of the things that you'd want to look at is, in terms of your ability to sell it on the open market, as it were, is a function of how the city received the property, any deed restrictions, and whether or not you could, in fact, sell it for any purpose other than what it was given to you by or for. But that's a package we could put together for if the council wants to evaluate that.
I guess I can support that. I'm just a discussion about it, but I'm not really. I don't have much interest in selling off property. I think it's probably the most valuable commodity that we have in South Orange County. So, as former Park and Rec Commissioner Manning mentioned today, sometimes waiting produces a really good thing. And so, we probably, the previous councils of old could have tried to develop a sports park 10, 12, 15 years ago, but it wouldn't be the amazing thing we have today. So, it took probably tremendous fortitude on their part to tell the community to wait. And then in Mr. Manning's experience personally, watching all of his kids graduate and go off to college and have kids of their own, so that we wait and make the right decision for the benefit of the entire community, even if we might not personally benefit from it. So, I'm willing to have the discussion, but I'm really not excited about talking about selling off property. If some private company has a use for it, then we could probably find one too, whatever it might be. And so that's just my thought. There's a lot of stuff that people would like to have. We've just developed this and produced this incredible sports park. We're working on this amazing civic center. How I look at it is, in a 5 to 6 year period of time, we're developing and providing to the community what a lot of communities see over a 50-year period, right? So we shouldn't just check the box and say, sports park done, civic center done, what's the next project, and how many more millions of dollars can we spend on more? I think that, just like I tell my kids, we just have to have patience. And again, it takes fortitude, because there are people out in the community saying, I really want this and I want it now. And it's hard to say wait. To my 3-year-old when he wants more M&Ms, it's hard to say wait, but I still do it. And so I think that's an important component here of this whole discussion, that we really just try to lay this out, because we could sell off property, we could sell off whatever isn't deed restricted, get some dollars and do some projects right now, but that property is never going to come back.
No, I'm not pushing anything, but I'd like to see it, and I'd also like to see the numbers, like what does a community garden cost? If we know there's a community garden, a 2-acre community garden, what's that cost? What's the revenue? Same thing, dog park, same thing, sports arena, so that we have a better conception. Where is everything? What are all these things going to cost? What could we put where, when?
Correct.
So that's...
Yep, and like I said, I'm supportive of that, just in general. I'm not supportive of selling off property, but it doesn't mean there might not be that one-off case, but, that's just my overall philosophy here. It's the most valuable commodity we have here in South Orange County, so...
I don't think he meant that. I think he just wanted to see what was out there in possibilities. So with the remnants we have, I would like to keep those 3 in there: the dog park, the community garden, and arena soccer, just for future discussions. I think that's what we had it in there.
Yeah,
the other one that comes up, and we could consider that too. It came up in the satisfaction thing all of a sudden out of nowhere. The swimming pool. Some people have mentioned it, and then probably we should talk about whether we want to throw that in as a 4th one or not. I know Mr. Dunick says that some other cities have had a lot of problems with them.
The cost, yes, Mr. Gardner, the cost to run a municipal facility, and I'm sure the HOAs know, because you know what it costs you to maintain the pools that you do, incredibly expensive. And so it's not just the capital cost, it's also the staffing and the maintenance associated with the facility. I've had my own theories over the years as to why we've never seen it in the survey. Quite like we did this last time, is a function of most of the HOAs have some really nice facilities. People don't feel like they need to have one from the city, particularly when there's one at the high school. But we did see it this time. We saw it rise to a level that we hadn't seen in the past, so it's really a function of what the council wants us to look at. If you want to add the fourth or not at this juncture, it's certainly your pleasure.
I haven't seen that in my own thing, so I'll leave it with the 3 and keep them in future, unless I get consensus otherwise. Do we have consensus on that, gentlemen? Okay. Moving on. Planning, building, safety, and development.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I guess I'm going to suggest that based on a previous question by Councilmember Robinson, some of the things obviously on this list we're already doing as well. So just that sort of in mind as it relates to updating the general plan. Yes, the reference to the PCM process. Yes, that's already underway. So you do have some of those things that have occurred, and some of these other things, clearly, they're not things that we're doing. But again, some of them we are. So you just want to keep that in mind.
I see that most all this is, a lot of this is already on our futures, and I don't think it's worthy of a 5-year plan, but I think it's many of these ideas, gentlemen, can be brought back to us as future items on our agenda on the City Council too. Put it on the agenda for future discussion. But many of these things, and so if I don't hear anything, I'm moving on to economic development. Something I would like to talk about is, and I think that we have planning commissioners here from past. Along the 5 corridor, we have some of the older buildings along the 5 freeway between Lake Forest and Big 5. Maybe as an incentive for maybe some renovation there and redevelopment is maybe allow a height increase from the 3-story to maybe a 5-story, or for the possibility of that for future discussion, just to help redevelopment. Obviously, we want to give incentives for the people to redo some of those areas, and so it would give us an idea of maybe if we had threw that out there along the 5 freeway, along the 5 corridor.
Maybe could I make a friendly amendment,
please?
Maybe we make it into a specific plan and have a specific plan for that area. I don't know what we want to call it, but close to the 5 freeway specific plan is what I would call it.
Sounds as good as any. I would share with the council, if you, and maybe this is something that we can send to all of you, one of the benefits but burdens of being involved in this for such a long period of time. The city created the El Toro Road Revisioning Project that identified exactly what it is that some of you are talking about, because it concentrated certain uses towards the freeway, and they changed as they went up El Toro Road. And you already have that as somewhat of a policy document that currently exists, and I know we could probably dust it off and send it out to you if you haven't seen it in the past. But clearly some of the uses that the city might contemplate that would be closer to the freeway are more regional draws, and as you go further up, it's more neighborhood serving up El Toro Road. How far you anticipate this conversation to go, because it clearly along the 5 freeway visibility for Lake Forest, it goes not only on El Toro Road, it obviously goes over to Lake Forest Drive, and there's our buildings that are adjacent as you go all the way up our side. We know the shopping center at Lake Forest Drive and certainly the freeway is being redone right now. And so you already have that investment going on. The area that is not in the revisioning process per se was where the old City Hall used to be on Lake Center Drive. You've got the Sammy's facility now that's been reopened because it used to be the Black Angus. There's a lot of office complexes in there. We've got one vacant site that used to be a motel, right? But if you're talking about a strategy where we would allow for greater densities along there by height or whatever in order to stimulate private reinvestment, because redevelopment is dead, and your ability to invest public dollars into some of these projects is somewhat limited now by more generalized law. So partly what you might see as a way by which to do that is incentivizing private reinvestment, and for the most part they're interested in return on their investment. So densification, I think that was a word that was used by one of your planning commissioners. He might have meant that more broadly across the community, but clearly it's something that I think what I hear Mayor Voice talking about is along the 5 freeway.
Yeah, and specifically along that location where the hotel, the old motel it was, and some of those older, those buildings are getting into the 30 and 40-year-old buildings, and so just to spur private investment into that, maybe we could look into that. Maybe even in that just one general area, even possibly. I was thinking that, not too long ago, I was at the grand opening of a new courtyard by Marriott down in over in the Irvine Spectrum. I was there as a representative of Assemblyman Widener, giving a certificate on behalf of the ribbon cutting for the grand opening, and it's just a marvelous, with a full banquet hall in it. I mean, none of our hotels really have banquet halls in it where we can have weddings or graduation parties or the football booster parties for the El Toro football team. We've got to go outside the city for many of those venues. And so I was, the old shopping center, Big Five, there's areas where we actually have older, dilapidated buildings that if you maybe made it feasible for the property owners and economically beneficial to them, they would actually spur their redevelopment. So maybe just put that in some future ideas for us.
Yeah, I like the idea, and I'm just thinking with the 5 and Caltrans, we probably, if they're going to be redeveloping that area, that's the area, the Big 5. So we probably need to coordinate that with them.
Well, I'm just throwing out ideas.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. All right.
I'm not married to a specific plan, but yeah, something comprehensive.
All right, and then we got it just for future discussion. So, and I guess that takes us to
Street is Schwartz Drive. May the topics with the Schwartz be with you.
economic development. That closes our agenda items.
Yes, it does, Mr. Mayor. I think the staff has been taking copious notes of what those things are that you identified that you'd like us to do some additional analysis on. If there was anything that was missed, council members may want to bring those up now, but otherwise what we'll do is take what we heard this evening and do additional analysis and bring those back as part of your conversation, if it fits into the budget conversation as I've articulated earlier, or as a part of the first draft of your 5-year plan.
I forgot to mention my my microbrewery plaza.
Mr. Woods, if I may, the one item that I'd like to bring up is item number 46 under the caption roadway and general infrastructure improvements. Item number 46 titled Enhance the Alton Park Monument Sign. And I look to Mr. Dunick to advise my dear colleagues here what this item is about. I'm confident Mr. Dunick can do a much better job than I can. letting you folks know what this is about.
Please.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, as I know that Councilmember Nick recalls, the park sign for Alton Park and Foothill Ranch was damaged because of a car accident, and the city went ahead and rebuilt the sign, and we used the standard park signage that we use throughout the entire community. There was a resident who recently addressed you, but has for some time, and would like to have that park sign changed to use a stone treatment. I think that is more consistent in his mind with that which you see at different places, not universally, but different places throughout Foothill Ranch. That was the request that you had. I believe that is what Councilmember Nick is talking about. It would be to ask the staff to look at that. We anticipate already the cost is about $10,000. I think we've probably sent that to you previously, but we could obviously put that into your CIP, into your 5-year plan, or whatever your pleasure is as it relates to that if you want further analysis. But I believe that's it, Mr. Nick. Is that true?
Yes, sir. Thank you so very much. Thank you indeed.
The guy, the resident who was interested in that, he quoted me $3,000. But, that may not...
I believe the latest number we had, but we certainly can verify that, Councilmember Gardner. But the number that we had been using previously, I guess if we're tearing it all down and then rebuilding it, there's more costs associated with that. I'm not sure that would be the case, but we had looked at about $10,000. If the council is desirous, we'll re-verify some of those numbers and we can bring it back to you.
I think that would be ideal. I think if we could get perhaps a firmer idea as to what the actual cost will be for what level of enhancement, perhaps we can make an intellectual decision at that point whether we can move forward, whether we should move forward with it or not. That's my humble opinion. Thank you all.
A $500 car might help with some of the, tear down expense. So, no, but with all seriousness,
say that again. I didn't hear.
Sorry. But with all seriousness, though, I'd also like to have like an inventory of how many of these signs we have, I guess, so that we could kind of look at the big picture. And if we happen to move forward with this one, then what could the potential future implications be if like 10 or 12 other parts of the community say, hey, now we want our sign changed too. So, if we just have some sort of just general, nothing's, not a whole lot of time.
So along,
Go ahead. Mayor Pro Tem.
well, along with that, I thought I heard something. I'm hoping this wasn't at this late hour some kind of hallucination, but I thought I heard something about volunteer labor recently. And would it be possible to say we maybe give $1,000 if they pitched in $2,000 or $3,000, and the volunteers? Wasn't there something that we just recently talked about that volunteer labor that they could do? If the community desired to kind of come together and tear down the sign, that's volunteer labor. If we agreed to allow them to do that. I'm not trying to encourage anyone to do anything prior to talking to the city. But isn't volunteer labor exempt from prevailing wages?
Sure. Mr. Mayor and council members, I can speak from personal experience. My Eagle Scout project when I was 16 years old was volunteer labor in the city of Fountain Valley. And it was a public works project that we did for free for the city. So, for example, Eagle Scout projects can be done voluntarily. If volunteers want to band together and do work, they can do that. This Saturday, I'm doing work in my city voluntarily to help our Parks and Rec department. So it is legal, it is permissible, and it can be pursued.
Well, I think that would be one way that maybe we could cut down the cost on this and not really get involved from staff very much, is try to solicit volunteer labor from this individual who I also talked to.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as long as there's proper oversight by the city, because we have liability with whatever it is they build, so it's got to be done in a correct fashion. As long as that occurs, certainly we could check into those issues.
That was part of my...
I'm sure it was. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have a $500 car you're trying to get rid of right now, or I don't know?
A question to you on that Alton Park monument sign. What was it rebuilt in a different format than it was prior to?
The stone treatment on it, yes, was different than what was there before. We can send you some before and after pictures, clearly as to, because we have them, as to what the sign looked like before it was damaged and what it looks like now. Virtually every one of our parks has the same sign motif. It's
that one didn't?
That's the one that's replaced out there at Alton Park. It did not look anything like that before it was damaged. That previous park sign had been built by the developer when they built Foothill Ranch. And consequently, when it was damaged and staff replaced it, they replaced it with one that is consistent with all the other parks that we have in town. With one, I would want to add, with one recent exception, and that is the Baker Ranch Park sign that is different, predicated on the development of that community. So to a certain degree, there has been a new precedent that's been created. But the council, I think, at some juncture would want to talk about how much you want to vary from those kinds of standards throughout the community, and does it become a 5-year project in which you want to go around and start tearing down signs that are perfectly okay just to change their motif, or do you do it when they get damaged or need to be replaced? That's sort of the conversation you could have at some point if you wanted to do something more aggressive than dealing with this one instant case now at Alton Park.
And just briefly, that the old sign was rectangular, very like kind of stone block, or like not a headstone, but it just kind of. Yeah, no, that's the new one. The new one is more rounded with the river rock in it, and it looks absolutely completely different. It's very striking, the difference between the two.
If I may, my impression is that the old sign, before it got damaged, the original sign, that was similar, if not identical, to other signs in the Foothill Ranch area, right?
Yeah, that's what I said, Mr. Nick. It is consistent with other signs that were built by the developer. At the time they developed portions of Foothill Ranch. There's some variation in some of the stone treatment, not necessarily the parks, but what was there is consistent with what you would see with some of the other facilities.
Thank you. So I understood correctly. As such, perhaps, and I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback, but as such, perhaps it would have been, I don't want to say it would have been wiser, because the staff is definitely wise. It would have been probably more
advantageous.
Thank you. It probably would have been more advantageous if we had been consistent in this new sign. In other words, something gets broken, you fix it. As long as the original thing was matching a whole bunch of others, then I think you really ought to make it match again, as opposed to bringing a new thing that matches signs elsewhere in town. I mean, so I think there is some, truth be told, in my heart, I think there is some legitimacy to what the gentleman is claiming. I just wanted to share with you my thoughts. Thank you, sir.
So we're asking for consensus to put it for a cost evaluation on the future sign. Got it.
And potential volunteer labor, too, with the city's
certainly. Yeah, it was the last
supervision.
Supervision oversight, certainly.
All right.
The Eagle Scouts, just on that point, Eagle Scouts approached me about 2 weeks ago about doing a project. I asked them to talk to you. Did they follow up?
Not with me personally, but oftentimes those kinds of projects are done through Public Works, and Mr. Wheeler's shaking his head yes.
Oh, did they?
So he may have already approached us.
Okay.
I'd just say we routinely get inquiries from various Eagle Scouts. We've got several going on all times.
All right. Well, do we need any other consensus on that? You got that?
I believe we have it now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that brings us to item number 17. Legislative regulatory matters.
Agenda item 17, legislative and regulatory matters, submitted by city manager.
Mr. Members of the City Council, I believe we've placed a yellow sheet just as an update on one of the bills that were provided to you in staff's recommendation on those bills. It's information that we identified last time, and we've updated it for you. And we'd be glad to respond to any questions that you have about those items.
So, based on the yellow sheet, you already submitted a letter, just based on kind of general council policy, you know, how we've, what's that, SB 355, so, but you need some action on SB 608, is that correct? Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
It's, I mean, I've read through, it seems very consistent with, you know, how we've always been as a council and how we're currently made up as well, so, you know, I'll make a motion that we oppose Senate Bill 608.
I'll second that. Gentlemen, all in favor?
That motion carries unanimously.
Is that the only one other one there?
By the way, they also talked about that, and I'll talk about this just briefly. But that was a discussion point at a committee I was just at.
Do you need us to take some formal action on the SB 355, or?
You want to vote on it?
Yeah, I think the sense the staff has is that the council's certainly opposed to the bill.
Okay.
And we've already articulated that position, so if you want to change it, that'd be fine.
No.
If not, then we'll run with what we've already done.
All right.
Sounds good.
Here.
The city manager report?
I have nothing further this evening, Mr. Mayor and Chairman of the Housing Authority, as either the Executive Director or the City Manager. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that brings us to Councilman Gardner.
I have nothing tonight, but
Oh, my God.
first time, I know. I thought they complained the
Well,
last time.
we'll move on.
No, you never shut up. You went on for 10 minutes.
Councilman Nick.
Shut up, sure. That's it.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly.
Did he give you his time?
No, I just need about a minute tonight, actually. Very quickly, if I could beg of you, Mr. Dunick, and I apologize, madam, I don't know how to pronounce your last name properly. I'll refer to you by Ms. Margie. If I could beg of you, Mr. Dunick, Ms. Margie kindly, a couple of hours ago during the public speaking, I think it was, she requested for some, and I know you made notes, she requested that through the leaflet, and if we can just do that, great. If I need to do something in my capacity to get my colleagues to support me, just let me know so we can. That is a very, very small request by someone who's done so much for us, and by an organization who's done so much for the community. So I think that's the least we can do to fulfill her wish. And if there's whatever I need to do, just let me know and I'll do it.
Councilmember Nick, I have a suggestion. Maybe you'd be willing to support, but you know, typically I think like a 100th anniversary would be something that would be resolution worthy, like we did Arbor Day,
Of course.
Earth Day. So you know, maybe that's something that we could start with in doing a resolution to the Kiwanis Club of Lake Forest and Kiwanis International
100-year anniversary.
100-year anniversary.
Great. In fact, that is very, very smart. But it doesn't have to be in place of anything and everything else that we can do. We can just do whatever we can do to promote the cause, to promote them, and then of course this would be a great, smart addition to all we can do for them.
And Mr. Members of the Council, certainly tomorrow the staff will discuss the issue, ensure that we understand how it fits into broader policies as it relates to the use of the city's resources for the purposes of that in terms of any one particular nonprofit. And so we certainly already kind of took the note, at least I did, that we're going to take a look at that. We'll get back to you. If there's anything that we believe is a problem, we'll let you counsel.
Great. I appreciate that, Mr. Knight. Thank you, and thank you, and thank the staff equally. I thank my colleagues. And I forgot to say, why are you still here? I mean, those of us this side of the podium, I can understand. The rest of you should have left hours ago, should have not bothered to come. You all have a great evening. I wish you all and your loved ones the best in life. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Councilman Robinson.
Have a good evening.
And Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, we're on a roll right now.
All right, I'm going to try and be like the FedEx guy from the 1980s. I was just appointed to the League of Cities Environmental Quality Committee, which I attended nearly 10 days ago. They were asking us to take positions on 3 pending legislation items, all allowing the state to have more tentacles into our city's life, and we were very fortunate to oppose each and every one of those.
Good job.
So local control is strong, at least 10 days ago in the EQ committee. Other quick updates. I don't know if everyone saw this, but Governor Brown declared an executive order to reduce urban water consumption by 25%. We have 3 water districts in town. Irvine Ranch, they're going to be, and it varies by water district. 16% reduction is what they're tasked with. El Toro has a 24%, and Trabuco Canyon has a 32%. So I think it would be wise if the city were to maybe help out our sister agencies and maybe coordinate with them, post it on our website, maybe put it in publications, those percentages, and obviously working with them. Also, grasses, your lawn, you're not going to be able to water them between 8 a.m. in the morning and 5 p.m. So get ready. We need to probably do artificial turf and do smart timers. And I really think this is a regulatory drought. We don't have enough storage in California. We need to increase it by like 6-fold. A recent statewide proposition, I think it was 1X or 1, is increasing some funding, but it's not going to be anywhere what we need. I'm a big fan of conservation and recycled water, but we need more storage. I'll ask about the turf another night, and there was a very important ruling as it relates to tiered rates. And so the water district where I work, we actually did an amicus brief on that appeal, and it's good news. Arbitrary tiered rates were denied, but cost-based tiered rates survived. So with that, thank you for your indulgence here tonight.
Me and the city manager, Bob Dunick, attended a South Orange County Mayor's meeting with the Sheriff Department, and the Sheriff talked about cost increases, and there was a great concern and a great response by the sheriffs in working with us to mitigate those increases. And so we're satisfied that they're moving in the right direction, and I think that what we're getting in Lake Forest, again, I'll reiterate it, with the increased patrol time because of the substation in our city, I think is going to be make up for any of the increases that are outside of our control anyways. And so with that, I'd like to close this meeting and close the Housing Authority also.